Hi guys. Tonight we're heading into the heart of a cold so deep it could bite through bone. You can almost feel it now, the sting on your cheeks, the brittle air filling your lungs, the silence that comes when snowberries sound itself. Out on the open frontier of the 1800s, there's no comfort in a thermostat, no electric light to chase away the darkness. Just you, your horse, a canvas bedroll, and the endless sky. You're about to live through a cowboy's winter, where the world freezes and survival depends on clever hands, grit, and a little luck. You probably wouldn't last the week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. The wind comes first. Not the gentle kind that plays with prairie grass, but a long, low moan that rolls across the plains like something alive. You pull your coat tighter around your shoulders and lean into it, the brim of your hat snapping in the gust. The sun dips early this time of year, turning the horizon into a bruised line of violet and gold. Soon it's gone entirely, and the first flakes drift down like ash. The air smells of wood, smoke, and iron. Your horse snorts, steam rising from its nostrils like the breath of a locomotive. You both know what this means. Winter has come early. The cattle feel it too. Their hides are thick, but the cold seeps through even them. They huddle together, tails to the wind, lowing in quiet misery. You can't blame them. The temperature's dropping faster than you expected, and there's no sign of a proper camp yet. You ride ahead, scanning for a spot with even a hint of shelter. A gully, a clump of cottonwoods, anything to cut the wind. The prairie stretches endlessly, flat and white, dotted with dark humps where grass still pokes through. It feels like the world is shrinking to the space between you and your horse's steady breath. Historians still argue whether early cowboy crews had it worse in the northern plains or down in the high deserts. Both could kill a man in different ways. Up north, the cold didn't just sting, it claimed fingers and ears before dawn. Farther south, the dryness split lips and cracked skin until even a smile hurt. Tonight, you're somewhere between the two, under a vast sky filled with starlight sharp as glass. You find a patch of land near a creek, though it's more a sheet of ice now than running water. The ground is uneven, but beggars can't be choosers. You dismount, patting your horse's neck, and start gathering what little wood you can find. Dead branches, brittle as bones. Your fingers ache as you strike the flint. Once, twice, again. Finally, a spark catches, a curl of smoke, then the soft crackle of flame. The relief is almost physical. The firelight spills across your gloves and boots, glinting off the metal of your spurs. You hold your hands near it, feeling the skin tingle back to life. The others arrive slowly, faces half hidden in scarves, leading their mounts. One of them, old Walt, mutters something about this being just a taste of what's coming. He's been through more winters than most, and the way his eyes stay on the sky tells you he's not exaggerating. He claims he once saw snow so deep a cow could walk clean over a corral fence. You laugh softly, but the sound feels small in all that open space. As the night deepens, you wrap your blanket tighter, drawing it up to your chin. The stars shimmer like frost caught mid-air. Somewhere out there, coyotes cry, their howls carried thin and high across the plain. Your fire sputters and pops. You chew on a piece of jerky so hard it could double as boot leather, chasing it with a sip of coffee that tastes of smoke and metal. It's not much, but it's something. The warmth seeps slowly into your bones. There's a peculiar comfort in this kind of hardship. The world narrows down to simple truths: fire, food, shelter, companionship. You can't think about spring yet. Just the next hour, the next sunrise, the next time your hands thaw enough to work the reins again. The horse shifts behind you, restless. You murmur to it quietly, voice low and even. The rhythm of your words seems to calm it. Funny how talk can warm even when the air itself wants you gone. A quirky tidbit floats in your mind. One old ranch manual claimed cowboys could tell the exact temperature by how loud the snow squeaked under their boots. Supposedly, the higher the pitch, the colder the night. You test it now as you shift your feet, and sure enough, it's a sharp, quick chirp. Maybe it's nonsense, but maybe not. Out here, even small superstitions can feel like knowledge. The fire dies lower, but no one adds more wood. You're saving it. Each log is a treasure. You lie back, using your saddle as a pillow, the blanket pulled up over your face to trap your breath. The stars blur through the frost forming on your eyelashes. The wind has quieted for now, but you can hear it shifting far off, rolling across the land like a train that never stops. Somewhere in that half-awake place between thought and dream, you imagine the first cowhands who rode this country long before fences or towns, following cattle drives that stretched 1,000 miles. They saw the same stars, felt the same cold. They were young, reckless, and convinced they could outlast the land itself. Some did, many didn't. The prairie remembers them, even if no one else does. The embers pulse softly, red as a heartbeat. You curl tighter, listening to the faint creak of leather and the sigh of horses settling. You think of home if you even have one beyond this. Somewhere there's a bed, a stove, maybe someone waiting. But right now, all that feels like a dream from another life. The only thing that's real is the cold pressing down, heavy and endless, and the fragile heat you've stolen from it for just one more night. Tomorrow, you'll wake to white light and frozen air. You'll check the herd, patch what's broken, and keep moving. Because that's what cowboys do when the frost comes early. You survive. The wind has settled into a long, steady sigh across the plains, a sound so constant it begins to feel like part of your breathing. The world has turned to shades of blue and silver, the moonlight painting every snowdrift with a faint shimmer. Your fingers are stiff when you wake, curled against the frost-stiffened edge of your blanket. The fire has gone out. All that remains is a dark circle of ash and the faint smell of char. You sit up slowly, joints protesting, and look around. The other cowboys are already stirring, stamping their boots, wrapping scarves around faces roughened by cold. It is time to make camp properly. The storm that came through last night was only the first, and if you want to live through this winter, you'll need shelter. There are no barns out here, no cabins waiting. You work with what you have, the way cowboys always did. Canvas tarps, wagon boards, and logs scavenged from wind-fallen trees become your raw materials. You start with the lean-to, a makeshift wall to turn the wind aside. You dig snow down to hard ground, drive stakes, and stretch the canvas tight. The sound it makes in the wind is like a drum beat, low and patient. It is not much, but it breaks the gale. Historians still argue whether most cowboys preferred sleeping under the stars or under crude tents. Some say the hardiest refused any cover at all, claiming the open sky kept them honest. Others suggest that was just bravado for campfire talk. The truth likely sits somewhere in between, depending on the storm, the supply wagon, and the courage of the crew. You move slowly, fingers clumsy with cold, but the rhythm of work helps. Chop wood, drag brush, tie rope, hammer pegs. The air fills with the sharp, sweet smell of pine sap and sweat. Each breath comes out as a white cloud. The horses stand close, their tails flicking, steam rising from their coats. They seem to understand that this activity means safety, and their quiet presence steadies you. A quirky old trick comes to mind. Some cowhands used buffalo chips, the dried droppings of the great herds, as building material when trees were scarce. They'd pack the chips tight between wooden frames to create windproof walls. The smell was not pleasant, but when the blizzard screamed across the plains, that strange, earthy insulation could save a life. Tonight, you almost wish you had a pile of it handy. When the shelter is done, it looks like something between a tent and a burrow. You crawl inside to test it, your knees sinking into the packed dirt. The space is narrow but dry, and the wind dulls to a faint murmur outside. The canvas shifts slightly with every gust, creaking like an old ship. You can almost imagine you're below deck, drifting across a frozen sea. Walt pokes his head in and grins, the grey in his beard frosted white. "You might just live through this one," he says, voice hoarse. You nod, half amused, half exhausted. He leaves you to it, moving on to help the others lash down another tarp. The crew works with a quiet efficiency that comes only from necessity. No one talks much. The wind fills the silence. You set a small fire pit just outside the shelter, ringed with stones you dug from the frozen earth. The flames dance low, orange and steady. You warm a tin of beans, stirring with a stick, watching the steam twist upward. The taste is bland, but it fills you. Food feels different out here, less about pleasure, more about survival. You can almost taste the miles it took to get each bite. The sky begins to change. Clouds roll in from the west, low and thick. Snowflakes start to fall again, silent and determined. The horses shift uneasily, sensing what's coming. You tighten the guy ropes, pile a little more snow along the base of the shelter for insulation. The irony of using snow to fight snow is not lost on you. Some say cowboys of the northern plains were part engineer, part poet, part gambler. You believe it now. Building a camp in this wilderness feels like negotiating with nature itself. Never conquering, only cooperating. You find yourself speaking softly to the land, thanking it for not taking you yet. Inside the lean-to, the firelight flickers against the canvas. The glow feels almost human, like company. You lie back on your bedroll, pulling your hat low over your eyes. Outside, the snow thickens, the flakes piling fast, muting every sound until it feels as though you are the last person left on Earth. You think of those who came before, the trailblazers pushing cattle north along the Chisholm or the Goodnight-loving trail. They faced winters without maps, without telegraphs, without any promise that spring would find them alive. Some ranchers kept records, tallying how many cattle froze each year. A few pages from those ledgers still exist, filled with neat handwriting and grim arithmetic. In one winter of the 1,880 seconds, entire herds vanished beneath snowdrifts taller than a man. Yet every spring new drovers took the same routes, as if the land's cruelty only sharpened its allure. You glance toward the horizon, barely visible through the snowfall. It's strange how beauty and danger blend here so completely. The cold sky gleams like metal, and every breath feels like inhaling tiny shards of glass. You pull the blanket closer, feeling it scratch against your chin. The horses have settled again. Their breathing is steady, a rhythm that seeps into your pulse. You can hear the creak of saddles, the occasional clink of a bridle chain. You whisper a few words to the night, not a prayer exactly, but close enough. Something about holding on, something about making it through till dawn. The fire burns low, the canvas rustles. Snow builds against the edges, sealing you in with its cold silence. You close your eyes and listen to your heartbeat echo inside your ears, slow and steady, matching the rhythm of the plains. Tomorrow you'll have to check the herd again. You'll walk through the drifts, find which cattle survived the night, fix fences that broke under ice. But for now, in this fragile cocoon of warmth, you let yourself drift. The world outside may be frozen, but inside this little pocket of flame and breath, life persists. And that is enough. Morning comes pale and hard, a thin ribbon of light sliding over the horizon. The cold does not lift, it only changes shape. The frost melts for a moment on your breath, then freezes again on your mustache. Your horse's mane is stiff with ice. Somewhere nearby, a cow bellows in distress, the sound flat and far away in the frozen air. You pull on your gloves, kick life into your boots, and begin the daily ritual that winter demands, keeping the herd alive. The first thing you learn out here is that cattle are stubborn but fragile. They may look strong, but their lungs freeze easily, and their hooves can crack if the ground stays icy too long. Most ranch records from the late 19th century mention this, how cowhands would spend entire days breaking ice on watering holes, just so the herd could drink. The work was endless. You swing an axe now, chipping through the crust of a frozen pond. Each strike sends up shards that catch the light like glass. The water below steams faintly, black and alive. Some drovers claimed that cattle could sense a coming storm hours before it arrived. They would start to bunch together, noses to the wind, tails flicking. Old ranch manuals advised paying attention to that behavior. Sometimes, the animals were a better barometer than the sky. You watch them now, the slow movement of dozens of shaggy backs rising and falling in rhythm, a living sea of patience. There's a trick you remember hearing about. When grass ran short, cowboys sometimes cut branches from cottonwoods and let the cattle gnaw the bark for nutrients. It sounds ridiculous, yet diaries from the period mention it with total seriousness. You test the idea yourself, tossing a few stripped twigs into the snow near the herd. To your surprise, one curious steer begins to chew, eyes half closed, steam puffing from its nostrils. Desperation makes ingenuity look like genius. The men move quietly around the herd, checking brands, counting heads. The cold steals voices, turning speech into breathy murmurs. You see Walt at the edge of the group, hunched under his coat, rope coiled in one gloved hand. He waves you over and points to a cow limping badly. Its leg is stiff, likely injured, crossing a hidden ditch under the snow. You kneel to look. The animal's eyes are dull, rimmed with frost. You can't do much beyond clear the ice and coax it toward the rest. In this weather, even small wounds become fatal if ignored. Accounts from that era often describe how entire herds could be lost overnight. A single blizzard could turn the open prairie into a white graveyard. One Wyoming rancher in 1886 wrote that his cattle stood frozen like statues, facing the wind, snow-caked over their nostrils. The image stays with you as you move through your own herd. Every lowing breath sounds like a prayer against stillness. Some cowboys believed singing calmed the cattle, that the steady rhythm of a human voice kept them from panicking during storms. You hum softly, a simple tune carried by the wind. The herd stirs but stays calm. Maybe it works. Maybe it's just something you tell yourself to feel less helpless. No one can quite agree if it truly mattered, but almost every drover you've met swears they've seen it work. You glance at the sky again. The clouds are thin but fast, rolling east. There's time before the next storm, enough to check the feed supply. The haystack by camp is half gone already. You start hauling armfuls of it, scattering flakes near the herd. The smell is sweet, the sound crisp, like tearing old paper. Each cow lowers its head and begins to eat with slow, deliberate motions. There's satisfaction in that sound. It means they'll live another night. There's something ancient about this work, something beyond history or record. You think about the people who drove buffalo herds before cattle ever grazed these plains, the indigenous hunters who understood every sound, every shadow. They survived winters here for centuries without canvas, without firewood hauled by wagons. Compared to them, your own endurance feels borrowed. The sun drags itself higher, though it gives little warmth. The snow blinds you with its brightness. You pull your hat down low, guiding your horse toward a distant ridge to check for strays. The world feels endless, yet strangely intimate, every detail etched in ice. You spot movement near a cluster of rocks, two calves huddled together, half buried. You dismount, wading through snow that reaches your thighs. The calves blink slowly, too weak to rise. You whistle for help. Within minutes, two riders appear, ropes already coiled. Together you lift the calves onto makeshift sleds and drag them back toward camp. By the time you return, your breath is ragged and your hands burn with cold. You warm them near the fire, the pain blooming in waves as blood returns. Someone passes you a tin cup of coffee. It tastes like ashes and salvation. The smell fills your nose, thick and familiar. You sip slowly, watching the herd through the wavering heat. There's a moment when you catch yourself staring into the distance, seeing nothing but white and grey. The silence is immense, heavy enough to feel like company. You realize how much of survival out here is not just about muscle or willpower, it's about rhythm. Feed the herd, Check the water, mend the fences, sleep when you can. Routine becomes religion. Researchers who study frontier life still debate whether the winter of 1886 to 87 marked the true end of open-range cowboying. That season, known as the Big Die-Up, killed hundreds of thousands of cattle across the northern plains. Some say it was the death knell for the old ways, forcing ranchers to fence their land and plan for feed. Others think it was simply another cycle of hardship, one in an unbroken line of trials. Whatever the truth, you can feel the echo of that history in every frozen hoofprint. The light begins to fade again, gold sliding back to grey. You finish your coffee, toss the grounds into the snow, and pull your coat tighter. The herd settles for the night, breath rising in unison, forming a low mist that drifts and vanishes. You look up once more at the sky. The stars are waiting, indifferent and eternal. Out here, survival is never guaranteed, but for now the herd stands, the fire burns, and you are still breathing. That is victory enough. By dawn, the cold has grown teeth. Your gloves freeze stiff before you can pull them on, and your breath crystallizes against the inside of your scarf. The air feels brittle, each inhale slicing sharp through your lungs. Every sound carries differently in this kind of cold, thin, and precise, as if the land itself has turned into glass. You wake to the familiar ache in your fingers, the kind that never fully fades in winter. Out here, frostbite isn't a threat you ignore. It's a companion that walks beside you, waiting for the first mistake. The saddle is frozen when you reach for it. The leather cracks faintly under your grip, stiff as iron. You have to warm the straps over the fire before they'll bend enough to buckle. It's a strange irony. The tools built to withstand the frontier can betray you in its worst moments. According to accounts from the time, many riders lost more gear to frost than to wear. Saddles split, reins snapped, boots froze solid overnight. Some drovers even slept with their saddles near the fire, risking smoke damage just to keep the leather supple enough to use in the morning. You lift your hands to the flames now, feeling the sting as heat returns. It's a fierce, almost electric pain. The tips of your fingers throb, nails purpled. You flex them slowly, testing. The skin along your knuckles is cracked and bleeding in tiny red lines. Out here, small injuries fester easily, and infection lurks in every scratch. You wrap a scrap of cloth around the worst cuts, tugging the knot tight with your teeth. It's ugly but functional. Some trail journals describe cowboys warming their hands by plunging them into freshly killed cattle for a few seconds, using the animal's body heat to stave off frostbite. It sounds grotesque, but desperate times demanded desperate choices. You think about that as you rub your palms together, imagining the lengths a man might go just to keep his fingers. People often romanticize cowboys, picturing sunsets and songs, but they forget the blood and frost that came first. No one agrees on how best to fight the cold. Some swore by layering wool under oilcloth. Others claimed animal fat rubbed into the skin worked better than any glove. A few even used kerosene, though the smell alone could make your eyes water for days. Researchers today still puzzle over how many frostbite cases went untreated or unnoticed until it was too late. The medical records of frontier towns are spotty, filled with vague notes about lost digits or frozen extremities. You can almost feel the ghosts of those old injuries in your own aching joints. Your horse stands nearby, breath billowing in great white plumes. You brush the frost from its mane, fingers moving slow and gentle. The animal's ears twitch, frost clinging to the edges like lace. Horses suffered as much as men, sometimes worse. When the temperature dropped too quickly, their hooves could split open, leaving them lame for days. Some cowhands tried wrapping the hooves in burlap soaked with grease, claiming it helped. Others said it was a waste of time. You can still smell the faint tang of linseed oil mixed with cold sweat on your gloves. The herd is restless. You hear them shifting beyond the camp, hooves crunching through crusted snow. You mount carefully, testing the saddle. It creaks like old wood. The leather feels foreign, distant, as though it no longer belongs to the living. You ride out to circle the cattle, the horizon glowing faintly pink behind you. The sky looks calm, but the air hides danger. When the wind starts moving again, it comes from the north, sharp and dry. As you ride, your face begins to numb. The edges of your nose and cheeks lose feeling first. You try not to touch them. That only makes it worse. The trick is to keep moving, keep the blood flowing. Some drovers tied strips of wool around their faces, leaving only the eyes visible. You remember seeing an old photograph of a cowboy in such a get-up, looking more like a bandit than a ranch hand. You wonder if that man lived through the season. You stop near the creek bed to water your horse. The surface is frozen, but you break through with the heel of your boot. The sound echoes across the still air, a single sharp crack. Beneath, dark water glints faintly. You let the horse drink, then cup your hands to splash some on your own face. The shock is immediate, biting. It feels like knives. Yet for a brief moment, it wakes you up completely, cutting through the fog of exhaustion. A shadow crosses the snow, a hawk gliding silently overhead. Its wings catch the first light of day, bright as metal. You watch it soar, unbothered by the cold. It's strange how the animals seem better suited for this life than the humans who pretend to control them. You think of all the men who froze in these plains, their stories buried beneath snowdrifts and time. Nature remembers them quietly. When you ride back toward camp, the sun is higher but offers no warmth. The men are gathered around the fire, rubbing their hands, stamping their feet. Walt holds up a piece of his saddle skirt, the leather split clean through. He curses softly, shaking his head. "She's done for," he mutters. You lend him your awl and some sinew thread, watching as he begins to stitch. The act feels almost ceremonial, the ancient art of mending something that will break again soon enough. Frontier records show that cowboys spent as much time repairing as they did riding. Saddles, boots, gloves, everything was patched and reused until it fell apart for good. You think about how that rhythm of fixing and enduring became part of the cowboy identity, a kind of quiet defiance against decay. There's pride in keeping something alive past its time, even if it's only a piece of leather. The fire crackles softly. Smoke drifts upward, carrying the scent of coffee and scorched wool. You warm your hands again, watching the flames reflect in the iron pot. Around you, the world remains white and silent, a frozen cathedral. The wind hums low, like a warning whispered through miles of emptiness. You flex your fingers once more, grateful for the faint ache that means they're still yours. Tomorrow there will be more ice to break, more leather to mend, more nights to outlast. For now, you sit close to the fire, tracing the lines on your palms, as if reading a map back to warmth. Out here, survival isn't heroism, it's habit. Night comes softly, not with thunder but with a slow surrender of light. The last streaks of pink fade into a deep cobalt sky, and one by one, the stars appear, cold and sharp as pins. You crouch near the campfire, feeding it small sticks, listening to the crackle as they catch. The warmth is a fragile comfort, but it feels like home after a day spent in frozen silence. The flames dance against the backdrop of snow, painting brief flickers of orange on your boots. You stretch your hands toward the heat, palms tingling, and glance around at the rest of the crew. Firelight has a way of softening faces. The men look older, gentler somehow, their eyes reflecting the glow like amber glass. Someone pours coffee into a tin cup, the liquid steaming in the frigid air. You take a sip and feel the bitter warmth slide down your throat, chasing the chill that's been nesting in your chest since dawn. The night hums quietly, the only sounds the hiss of burning pine and the occasional low murmur of cattle beyond the camp. There's a comfort in this stillness that no saloon could ever match. Records from the frontier mention how cowhands valued the evening fire more than any luxury. It was their gathering place, their confessional, their only theatre. Around it, songs were sung, stories stretched taller than the truth, and silence shared like prayer. You understand now why so many men carried harmonicas in their saddlebags. The music filled the emptiness in a way words never could. You hear it tonight, Sam, the youngest of the crew, pulling out his battered harmonica. He sits cross-legged, breath fogging in rhythm as he plays a slow tune, something wistful and wandering. The notes drift into the night, bending and curling around the firelight before dissolving into the darkness. No one speaks while he plays. The sound feels like memory itself. Afterward, Walt starts talking. He tells a story about a winter storm he survived years ago, the kind that buried horses where they stood. He claims he once had to burn a wagon wheel to stay alive. Everyone laughs, though not because it's funny. It's the kind of laugh that comes from recognizing your own fear in someone else's tale. In letters from old trail hands, evenings like this were often described as sacred pauses between suffering. During the day, the body works until it's numb. At night, the mind wanders just enough to remember it's human. You lean back, letting the warmth lick your face, the smoke curling past your hat brim. Your eyelids grow heavy, the crackle of fire almost hypnotic. An odd bit of frontier lore comes to mind. Some cowboys used to believe that if you stared into the flames long enough, you could see shapes of people you'd lost, faces flickering just beyond the light. Maybe it's the exhaustion, or the way shadows move, but you think you glimpse something for a second, a silhouette bending toward the fire, smiling. You blink, and it's gone. The air smells of wood smoke, coffee, and wet wool. The combination is oddly pleasant, grounding you in the moment. You pull your blanket tighter and glance toward the edge of the light. There, the horses stand still, outlined in silver moonlight. Their tails flick slowly, their breath rising in gentle plumes. Every so often one shifts its weight, the sound of snow crunching faintly beneath its hooves. No one can quite agree whether cowboys feared the dark. Some said they trusted it, finding comfort in its vastness. Others admitted it was the hardest part of frontier life, the endless black pressing against your small circle of light. Out here, the stars feel close enough to touch, yet the space between them feels infinite. You understand both kinds of fear. Sam breaks the silence again. "Think it'll snow tonight?" he asks. Walt snorts softly. "It always snows when you say that." The old man tosses another log on the fire, sparks flying upward like tiny comets. "Best not to tempt it," someone mutters. A few chuckle, then fall quiet again. You find yourself smiling despite the fatigue. The warmth from the fire fades quickly the moment you step away. You walk a short distance from camp, boots crunching over the frost. The night is still, save for the occasional groan of ice settling. Overhead, the Milky Way spills like white dust across the heavens. You stop and tilt your head back, feeling small in the best possible way. For all its brutality, the frontier has its moments of beauty that steal your breath more than the cold ever could. When you return to the fire, most of the crew are already lying down, blankets drawn tight, hats pulled low. You take your spot beside your saddle, which doubles as a pillow, and wrap yourself snugly. The fire crackles low, embers glowing deep red. You stare at them until your eyes begin to blur. Researchers today often note how those campfire gatherings shaped cowboy culture more than any ranch or trail ever did. They created a kind of unwritten brotherhood, built from shared silence and mutual survival. You feel that bond now, subtle but certain. Out here, no one pretends to be invincible. You rely on each other, even when words are scarce. A stray spark lands on your coat, and you brush it away gently. The air has that heavy stillness that comes before more snow. You pull your blanket up to your chin, feeling the faint vibration of snoring nearby, the rhythmic sigh of men too tired to dream. The last thought you have before sleep takes you is simple. The fire will die by morning, but you'll build it again. You always do. And maybe that's the truest definition of endurance, the quiet promise to relight the flame, no matter how often the night returns. When morning comes, the fire has burned down to a few glowing coals, and the air bites harder than ever. You pull yourself from the blanket, joints stiff and breath ragged, knowing the day's work begins with an empty stomach. The sky is pale and washed out, like the color has frozen out of it. Somewhere nearby, a pan clatters, and the smell of beans mingles with smoke. Breakfast is calling, though calling it breakfast feels generous. Food out here isn't about taste. It's about heat and fuel, about convincing your body to keep moving when it would rather give up. Most ranch records from the late 1800s describe the same staples: beans, biscuits, salt pork, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Eggs and fresh bread were luxuries, usually gone within the first week of a long drive. You scoop a spoonful of beans from the pot, the metal burning your fingers through your gloves. The beans are soft and smoky, flavored faintly by last night's firewood. You chase them with a sip of bitter coffee and a bite of biscuit that feels closer to stone than bread. An old cowboy saying claimed that cold beans taste like courage. You're not sure if that was meant as pride or apology, but this morning it feels true. The food is rough, the coffee harsh, yet both carry the comfort of familiarity. Each bite reminds you that you're still alive, still moving through this frozen wilderness. It's strange how food becomes memory out here. Letters from drovers often mentioned particular meals, not because they were good, but because they marked moments of warmth in a season of cold. One man wrote of baking biscuits on a shovel when his pan cracked from frost. Another described melting snow for water and flavoring it with bacon grease, claiming it was the best soup he ever had. You think of those stories as you chew, smiling faintly. It helps to know others endured the same indignities and found humor in them. Sam is tending the fire, coaxing the flames higher. The pot rattles as he stirs what's left. "We're running low on salt pork," he says. Walt looks up from his tin cup. "Stretch it with beans," he answers, as if that solves everything. You chuckle softly, the sound swallowed by the wind. The wind, always the wind. It sneaks through every layer of clothing, finding skin you thought was covered. You huddle closer to the flames, watching the coffee boil over in a hiss of steam. The smell is sharp, comforting in its own bitter way. Someone mentions the coming snowstorm. The talk fades quickly after that. Everyone's thinking about the same thing: how much wood is left, how many days the rations will last, and whether the herd can survive another week without losing weight. You remember reading that cowhands sometimes used dried beef fat as candles when oil ran out. They'd carve a wick from twisted cloth and let it burn, filling the tent with a thick, greasy smell. It wasn't pleasant, but it kept the dark at bay. You look at the shrinking pile of supplies and wonder if you'll have to try that trick before spring returns. Researchers who study frontier cooking say it was equal parts invention and desperation. Nothing was wasted, not even coffee grounds. Some cowboys reboiled them 3 or 4 times, then sprinkled the dregs on the fire to chase mosquitoes in warmer months. It's an odd comfort to think that even misery could be recycled. You finish eating and brush crumbs from your coat. The crew begins packing up the cooking gear, stowing pots and tins back into the chuck wagon. The cook, known simply as Cookie, checks each crate with the precision of a banker counting coins. Out here, every bean is accounted for. You glance at his hands, scarred, chapped, and steady. He's as important as any trail boss. Without him, morale would collapse faster than the fire on a wet night. The herd moves sluggishly in the distance, their breath forming clouds in the morning light. You pull your scarf higher, tucking it tight under your chin, and walk toward the horses. The crunch of snow under your boots is the only rhythm in this frozen world. As you move, you catch a faint whiff of bacon from the fire, what little remains, and your stomach growls despite having just eaten. Hunger is constant here, like the wind, always pressing at the edges of thought. An odd memory surfaces from an old journal you once read, a drover describing how he'd tuck hot biscuits under his coat to warm his hands before eating them. You decide, that's not a bad idea. Next time Cookie bakes, you'll try it. Survival often looks like laziness to those who've never been cold. As the sun climbs, the sky clears to a hard, perfect blue. The snow glints painfully bright. You squint, shading your eyes with a gloved hand. The land stretches flat in every direction, dotted with the dark shapes of cattle and the occasional flicker of a bird. You think about how many mornings like this have passed in silence, unseen and unrecorded. Every cowboy who lived through a winter like this carried the memory forever, even after the frost left his body. No one can agree which trail food was worst, though everyone seems to have a favorite complaint. Some said the biscuits could break teeth. Others swore the coffee could strip paint. What they all agreed on was that hunger forgives a lot. You learn to love whatever keeps you alive. You take one last gulp of coffee, grimace, and toss the rest into the snow, watching it hiss as it melts. Around you, the camp comes alive again, voices low, horses stamping, the jingle of harnesses. Another day begins, another set of miles and worries waiting. Before you mount up, you glance back at the fire. The flames are dying down, replaced by a swirl of white smoke curling into the blue sky. The smell of beans still lingers, thick and earthy. You take it in deeply, a reminder of warmth before facing the cold again. Out here, food isn't a luxury. It's a promise, a quiet vow that you'll make it through one more day. The night that follows feels heavier than the rest. The wind has shifted again, colder, sharper, carrying a sound that doesn't belong to the weather. You pause while checking the herd, your lantern flickering in the darkness. For a moment, all is quiet, just the rhythmic snorts of the cattle and the creak of your saddle. Then you hear it, a long, mournful howl drifting across the frozen plain. You turn slowly, scanning the horizon. The sound comes again, closer this time, followed by another and another until the night seems filled with it. Wolves. They have followed the herd for days now, drawn by scent and hunger. You grip the reins tighter, the leather cold and stiff in your hands. Your horse shifts uneasily, ears twitching toward the noise. In journals from the era, ranch hands often wrote of wolves with a mix of fear and respect. They weren't just scavengers, they were competitors, intelligent and patient. When the cold set in and food grew scarce, wolves would stalk the edges of cattle camps, waiting for the weak or the lost. Some drovers claimed to have seen them running alongside herds for miles, never attacking, just waiting. You believe it now as you listen to their cries weaving through the dark. You nudge your horse forward, moving slowly along the outer edge of the camp. The snow crunches softly under hoof, the sound swallowed quickly by the wind. The herd stirs, nervous, their low moans rolling across the night like a single, uneasy breath. You whisper to them under your breath, though you're not sure if it's for their comfort or your own. Cowboys had their own tricks for keeping predators away. Some set fires around the camp's perimeter, hoping the flames would scare the animals. Others left scraps of meat laced with gunpowder or tobacco. It sounds strange, but old diaries mention it often enough to make you wonder if it ever worked. You glance at the small fire burning near the chuck wagon, its light faint and fragile against the vast dark. It looks far too small to hold back what's out there. Walt appears beside you, his coat pulled tight, his hat rimmed with frost. He's carrying his rifle. "You hear 'em?" he asks. You nod. "Yeah, they're close tonight." He spits into the snow and adjusts his grip. They always get brave when the moon's full. You look up, and sure enough, the moon hangs low and bright, its light silvering the plains. There's movement along the ridge, a flicker of motion that catches your eye. A dark shape against the white. Then another. They move low, graceful, almost soundless. You count 4, maybe 5. Your horse tenses beneath you, nostrils flaring. You pat its neck gently, whispering nonsense words just to keep it calm. One curious detail often mentioned in frontier folklore was that wolves could mimic sounds to lure people or livestock. Some swore they could make their cries sound like crying children or barking dogs. Scholars today dismiss it as imagination, but out here, with the night pressing close and your heart thudding in your chest, you can almost believe it. The wolves keep their distance, shadows gliding along the snow. You raise the rifle, though you don't fire. Ammunition is too valuable. and they're too far to hit cleanly. Instead, you light another torch and plant it upright in the snow. The flame flares orange, casting long, trembling shadows. The herd shifts again, tails flicking nervously. The wolves stop moving. Their eyes catch the light, twin sparks glinting in the dark. For a long moment, no one moves. You can hear the faint whine of wind between the rocks, the soft creak of saddle leather, and beneath it all, the quiet pulse of fear. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the wolves turn and vanish into the black. You lower the rifle, exhaling slowly. Walt gives a low grunt. "They'll be back," he says. "They always come back." You nod. You know he's right. You've seen enough winters to understand that hunger is patient. You ride a slow loop around the herd before returning to camp. The fire has burned low, casting a weak glow over the men curled in their blankets. You add another log, watch the sparks drift upward and fade into the sky. The smell of smoke mixes with the scent of leather and cold metal. You listen for another howl, but the plains are quiet now. Too quiet. According to one old ranch account, cowboys sometimes named the wolves that haunted their trails, treating them almost like neighbors. One man wrote of a scarred gray he called Ghost, who followed his drives for 3 years without ever attacking. You wonder if that's the same kind of creature out there now, watching from the dark. Maybe it's not malice that drives them, just survival. You sit by the fire for a while, rifle across your knees, eyes fixed on the distant ridge. The stars above shimmer like frost caught mid-air. Somewhere beyond your sight, life moves quietly through the snow wolves, deer, maybe even another band of riders. You think about how all of you, man and beast alike, are just trying to make it through the same merciless winter. The fire crackles. The cattle murmur softly in their sleep. The wind carries a faint scent of pine and smoke. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the heat soak into your frozen skin. When you open them again, the ridge is empty, the night still. Predators come and go, storms rise and pass, but the fire endures. It always does. The days begin to blend together now, the light barely changing between dawn and dusk. Each morning feels like a continuation of the same frozen breath. You wake to the sound of hooves shifting, the groan of ice beneath the horses, and the low hum of wind crawling across the plains. The cold is constant, but it's not what eats at you most. It's the silence. Out here, there are no towns nearby, no laughter echoing off saloon walls, no distant church bells. Just the creak of leather, the hiss of wind, and your own thoughts moving in slow circles. The frontier can strip a man clean of noise until only his heartbeat is left. It's strange how the absence of sound can be louder than any gunfire. In letters written by cowhands of the late 1800s, loneliness was often mentioned as the hardest part of wintering on the range. One wrote that the silence pressed upon the ears like a weight. Another described talking to his horse for days simply to hear his own voice. You understand that now. You've caught yourself muttering at the coffee pot, at your boots, at the stars, anything to feel less invisible. There's a strange comfort in routine. You check the herd, mend fences, haul firewood, and return to camp. Each action predictable, almost meditative. You begin to lose track of time. A week feels like a day feels like forever. You try to remember the last time you heard laughter that wasn't swallowed by wind. You can't. Some cowboys carried small notebooks to fight off the silence, scribbling down songs, thoughts, or half-remembered poems. You've started doing the same, though your writing is clumsy and the ink freezes half the time. Still, the act feels necessary. The words give shape to something that might otherwise disappear. One odd practice you recall reading about was how cowhands sometimes carved their initials into frozen riverbanks, claiming it was a way to prove they hadn't vanished. You've begun to understand that urge too. There's something about the endless snow that makes you want to leave a mark, however small. You press your hand briefly into the frost near your fire, leaving a print that melts almost immediately. Still, it's proof you existed in this moment. The others feel it as well. Conversation has thinned to murmurs. Walt sits by the fire most evenings, staring into the flames with a look that drifts far beyond their reach. Sam hums to himself while patching his gloves, the same tune repeating until it's barely music anymore. Even the horses seem quieter, their movements slower, more deliberate. It's as though the entire world has agreed to speak only in whispers. No one can fully agree what kind of loneliness the frontier created. Some historians say it made men resilient, carving strength from isolation. Others argue it hollowed them out, leaving them unable to settle even after they returned home. Maybe both are true. You can feel that duality inside you, something hardening, something softening at the same time. You try to remember faces from before this life, but they blur easily. The memory of warmth becomes slippery. You think of a woman once, her laughter bright as summer, but even that sound fades before you can grasp it. Out here, memory and imagination start to share a single outline. That night, after the chores are done, you sit a little apart from the others. The fire flickers low, sparks twisting upward into the dark. You take out your small notebook and begin to write, though you don't know what to say. The pencil trembles in your fingers. You write about the stars, about the silence, about the feeling of being both nowhere and everywhere at once. You write that the wind sounds like a song with no words. A few researchers studying frontier diaries note that men often turned philosophical during the long winters, their entries growing poetic even if they didn't mean them to be. There's something about endless snow that makes a man notice the smallest details, the curl of smoke, the sound of boots on ice, the way your breath briefly glows before fading. You catch yourself describing these things in your notebook, surprised by the softness in your own tone. Sam sits down beside you. "Writing letters?" he asks quietly. You shake your head. "Just trying to keep my brain from freezing." He smiles, his teeth white in the firelight. "Then you're smarter than most." He doesn't say anything more, just sits there for a while, sharing the silence. It feels good, that small company. Words aren't always needed. Later, when you lie down to sleep, the sky is clear enough to see the Milky Way spilling across it, a soft river of light cutting through blackness. You stare at it until your eyes blur. It feels strange to think that people back east are looking at the same stars, warm inside their houses, their voices echoing against walls. Out here, you are part of the same world, yet so far removed it might as well be another planet. The cold deepens, the fire fades, and the night grows endless again. But for a brief moment, surrounded by the hush of snow and the slow breathing of the herd, you feel an unexpected peace. The loneliness is still there, but it's no longer cruel. It's quiet, almost companionable, as if the land itself has accepted you into its silence. Out here, solitude doesn't destroy you. It teaches you how to listen. The next storm arrives without warning. One moment the horizon glows with a pale sunrise, and the next it vanishes into a wall of swirling white. The temperature drops so fast it feels like the air itself is cracking apart. You pull your coat tight, tug your hat low, and squint into the wind. It's like standing in the center of a cloud made of knives. You can barely see the herd, though you know they're there, shapes moving somewhere beyond the haze. The snow blinds and muffles at once, swallowing sound and sight. Your horse shifts beneath you, uneasy, its mane coated in frost. You lean low over the saddle, trusting instinct more than vision. The world has reduced itself to two colors, white and the dull brown of your horse's neck. Accounts from cattle drives in the northern plains describe storms just like this, the kind that could erase entire herds. One Kansas drover wrote that, "Snow came sideways for days, and the sky had no top." You believe him now. The wind roars so loudly that even your thoughts seem to scatter. Each breath burns your lungs, and your eyelashes freeze together every time you blink. You shout something to Walt, but your voice is torn away instantly. He rides ahead, little more than a grey outline moving through the blur. The herd begins to bunch up, driven by instinct to huddle for warmth. You can barely make out the shape of their bodies pressing close, a living wall against the storm. You whistle softly, hoping they'll hold their ground. Losing them now would mean disaster. There's an old frontier trick you remember. When visibility disappears, you tie a rope from your saddle horn to the tail of the rider ahead. It keeps the line from breaking, even when sight fails. You and Walt do just that, knotting the coarse rope between your horses. It's a small comfort, that tangible link between two shivering souls in the chaos. Snow stings your face like grit. It seeps through every seam, soaking your gloves until your fingers ache with a dull, distant pain. You can feel the moisture freezing inside your coat, turning the fabric stiff. The storm howls, rising and falling like the breath of some giant creature. You lose all sense of direction. The sky and ground are the same color, and even the horizon has vanished. One curious piece of cowboy lore said that if you close your eyes in a whiteout and listen, you can sometimes hear which way the storm is moving by the pitch of the wind. You try it, closing your eyes for a moment despite the fear. The wind whistles high and sharp to your right, lower and heavier to your left. You turn slightly, hoping you've chosen the right direction. There's no guarantee, but hope is all that's left. The horses begin to falter. You can feel your mount trembling, its hooves slipping on the hidden ice below the drifts. You pat its neck, whispering nonsense words, voice cracked and raw. Easy, boy. Just a little longer. The sound of your own voice steadies you. The herd's low moans echo faintly through the wind, distant but grounding. Researchers still debate how cowhands managed to survive such storms without modern gear. Some suggest they relied entirely on instinct and repetition. Others believe luck played the largest part. You can see both sides now. Instinct tells you to keep moving, but luck decides whether there's shelter ahead or an endless white void. After what feels like hours, you spot a darker shape in the storm, a cluster of cottonwood trees. You and Walt steer toward it, heads down, snow whipping across your faces. The trees offer a small pocket of calm where the wind breaks. You can finally catch your breath, your horse's sides heaving beneath you. You dismount clumsily, knees weak, and grab at the reins to steady yourself. Walt shouts something, pointing toward the herd. You can't hear his words, but you see the urgency in his gesture. The cattle are drifting too far, pushed by the gale. Without them, the ranch is lost. You nod and climb back into the saddle. Together, you push out again, driving the herd back toward the trees, waving your arms and shouting hoarsely. The animals resist at first, then turn reluctantly, their massive bodies trudging through the drifts. Time loses meaning. There is only the rhythm of movement, the swing of your arm, the thud of hooves, the endless white swallowing every shape. You begin to feel lightheaded, the cold crawling deep into your bones. You can't tell if the trembling is from fear or fatigue. At some point, the storm begins to ease. The snow still falls, but slower now, in thick, lazy flakes. The wind softens to a sigh. The world reappears by degrees, the dark shapes of the cattle, the faint outline of trees, the glow of the dying sun behind the clouds. You pull your scarf down and take a long, shaky breath. The air tastes of ice and smoke. Walt rides up beside you, his face crusted with frost. "You alive?" he shouts. You nod, too tired to speak. He grins weakly, his teeth blue in the fading light. "Good. Then we ain't ghosts yet." You both laugh, though it comes out more like coughing. The herd settles again, their bodies steaming faintly in the cold. You pat your horse's neck, feeling the warmth beneath the ice. The storm has passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it hums in your ears. Later, when you return to camp, you find the fire buried under snow. It takes nearly an hour to dig it out and coax the embers back to life. When the first flicker of flame appears, it feels like resurrection. You sit close, hands trembling, watching the smoke curl upward. In a logbook from a Wyoming rancher, there's a line that reads, "After every storm, the world feels newly made." You understand that now. Everything around you looks fresh, untouched, pure. Even the pain in your fingers feels like proof of being alive. The snow still falls lightly, quiet and steady. You stare into the flames until your vision blurs, feeling the warmth seep back into your skin. Out here, survival doesn't feel heroic. It feels like gratitude, soft and wordless. You look at Walt and nod once more. "We made it," you say. He smiles faintly. This time. By the next morning, the camp feels heavier, quieter, as if the storm has drained not just the land but the men themselves. The sky hangs low and grey, and every surface glitters with ice. You move slowly, muscles sore from hours of riding against the wind. Each breath you draw in feels like it might freeze before it reaches your lungs. The fire burns low, its warmth barely brushing your hands. Sam is coughing again, deep and raw, the kind of sound that makes you wince. Walt tells him to drink more coffee, as if caffeine can cure what's creeping into his chest. But you know what it is. Everyone does. The winter has a way of finding the cracks in a man, his skin, his lungs, his resolve, and prying them open. In the records of frontier medicine, pneumonia was the silent killer. It started as a cough and ended in stillness. Doctors were scarce on the open range, and most cowboys became their own physicians. You reach into the supply box, pulling out a small pouch of herbs wrapped in cloth. A trick you learned from an old trail cook. Boil it in coffee and breathe the steam. It isn't much, but sometimes the mind believes what the body cannot. You set the pot over the fire, the water hissing as it heats. The air fills with the sharp scent of sage and pine. Sam leans over it, eyes watering as the steam rises into his face. "Smells like home," he mutters, though you know he hasn't seen home in years. You nod and pass him a tin cup. He drinks slowly, coughing between sips. Strange remedies like this were common among drovers. Some rubbed tobacco juice on frostbite, believing it drew out the cold. Others swore by kerosene mixed with sugar for sore throats. Ranch logs mention men chewing willow bark for fever, not realizing they were taking a primitive form of aspirin. The line between medicine and myth was thin, and survival often depended on whichever belief a man reached for first. You still carry a small bottle of whiskey in your saddlebag, not for drinking but for cleaning wounds. The cork is worn, the glass scratched from years of travel. It was given to you by a trail boss who said, "There's no problem out here a little whiskey and patience won't solve." You haven't tested that fully, but tonight you use it to disinfect the cracked skin on your hands. The sting is fierce, but the smell of alcohol cuts clean through the damp air. Walt sits across from you, his fingers wrapped around a cup. His nails are blackened with frostbite, though he doesn't mention it. He tells a story about a ranch hand who once used axle grease as hand lotion, swearing it saved his fingers. The others laugh, the sound rough but welcome. It feels good to laugh, even if the humor comes from desperation. No one truly knows how many cowboys died from infection rather than injury. Letters and diaries hint at it, but most names vanished with the snow. Some researchers say the worst wounds came from small things. A splinter, a cracked tooth, a blister rubbed raw. Without medicine, even a scratch could turn fatal. You think about that now as you wrap your hands in fresh cloth, the firelight glowing through the fabric like faint gold. A quiet settles over the camp again. Outside, the snow has stopped falling, but the world remains a white silence. The cattle huddle near the fence line, their hides rimed with frost. You can hear the faint creak of ice forming along the river. It sounds like distant thunder. You check the horses next. Their breath clouds the air, thick and steady. You brush their manes gently, inspecting for frostbite on their ears and muzzles. The horses rely on you as much as you rely on them. Their strength is your survival, and caring for them becomes a ritual, almost sacred. A curious detail from one ranch diary lingers in your mind. A cowboy who claimed to cure horse colic by whispering prayers and rubbing salt on the animal's chest. Whether it worked or not, he swore it calmed both him and the horse. You try it now, rubbing the horse's neck, murmuring words that mean nothing but sound kind. The animal exhales slowly, eyes softening. Maybe that's all healing ever is. Attention, rhythm, and a little faith. Inside the tent, Sam has drifted into uneasy sleep, his breathing shallow but steady. Walt leans back, staring at the fire. "We could use a doctor," he says quietly. You nod, though you both know none will come. The nearest town is hundreds of miles away, and even if someone rode now, the trails are buried. The only medicine you have is endurance. As night deepens, the wind returns, though gentler this time, carrying the faint scent of pine and smoke. You pour the last of the coffee and stare into the cup, watching the surface tremble. The warmth seeps into your hands, soothing the sting of cracked skin. There's something humbling about realizing how fragile the body really is. Out here, you start to respect your own heartbeat, the way others might respect a church bell. Every breath feels earned. Every cough from Sam feels like a warning. You think of stories told around campfires, how some drovers believed the plains could heal or kill depending on whether they liked you. Maybe that's why men talk to the land as if it listened. You whisper a few words into the night yourself. Not quite prayer, not quite wish, just gratitude for one more evening alive. The fire flares softly, throwing light against the canvas walls. You settle down beside it, the warmth lapping at your face. Outside, the stars shimmer faintly through a veil of ice crystals. Inside, the smell of herbs and smoke wraps around you like a blanket. Tomorrow, Sam might breathe easier, or he might not. You've learned not to think too far ahead. For now, you listen to the faint crackle of wood and the steady rhythm of horses breathing outside. For a moment, it almost feels like peace. The horses wake before you do. Their soft snorts ripple through the dawn, followed by the sound of hooves shifting on the frozen ground. When you crawl from your blanket, the cold hits like a wall. Frost has settled over everything. Your hat, your coat, even the firewood. You stamp your boots to loosen the ice clinging to the soles, then walk toward the corral. The animals watch you with dark, patient eyes, their breath rising in steady plumes that glow faintly in the morning light. Caring for them is more than habit now. It's partnership. Without them, you'd be stranded, helpless against the endless miles of snow. The bond between cowboy and horse is older than the fences that would one day split the plains. Letters from the trail often spoke of riders sleeping with one hand resting on the reins, as though the touch itself could keep them alive. You understand that feeling now as you stroke the neck of your mare, her coat rough and warm beneath the frost. You check her hooves first. The ground is frozen hard, and the constant cold cracks the edges, leaving thin white lines like scars. You scrape away the packed snow, murmuring to her softly. She flicks her ears and nudges your shoulder in return. That small gesture carries more comfort than words. There's an entry from an old ranch ledger you once read that claimed horses saved more lives than any rifle or fire ever did. When storms rolled in and men lost their bearings, the horses often found the way back to camp by scent or instinct. Some called it luck, others called it loyalty. You like to think it's a mix of both. You saddle up slowly, your fingers stiff and clumsy. The leather creaks as you cinch the straps. The smell of oil and horsehair fills the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of hay. Walt joins you, moving slower than usual. His horse stamps impatiently, puffing steam into the cold. "We need to check the river trail," he says. You nod. That stretch always freezes fastest, and if the cattle wander too close, they'll break through the thin ice before you can reach them. The ride is quiet. Snow muffles everything except the soft rhythm of hooves and the occasional creak of saddle leather. The sun sits low, its light pale and watery. You can see your breath drift upward and vanish. The landscape stretches out in all directions, a sea of white broken only by the dark lines of leafless trees. The beauty of it catches you off guard even now. For a moment, you forget the ache in your fingers. Halfway down the trail, you spot movement ahead. A small shape lies on the snow near the riverbank. You dismount and approach cautiously, boots crunching in the crusted drifts. It's a horse, or what's left of one. The poor creature must have broken through the ice and frozen before dawn. You kneel beside it, brushing snow from its mane. Its eyes are glazed, but the posture is peaceful, almost as if it simply lay down to rest. Walt removes his hat, standing in silence. After a moment, he says quietly, "Could have been any of ours." You nod, feeling the truth of it sink deep. Death doesn't linger out here. It just becomes part of the land. You drag a few branches over the body to keep scavengers away. There's no other burial possible until spring. It reminds you of something curious you once heard from an old wrangler. He said cowboys believed the spirit of a good horse lingered near camp until its rider left the range, watching over him like a guardian. You glance once more at the still form in the snow, half wishing it's true. Back at camp, you brush your mare again, grateful for her strength. She pushes her muzzle into your chest, warm breath seeping through your coat. You laugh softly, the sound startling in the quiet. For the first time in days, it feels good to laugh. Later, when the chores are done, you sit by the fire, repairing a broken stirrup strap. Your fingers move carefully, threading the needle through stiff leather. The repetitive work soothes you. The smell of smoke and saddle soap fills the air, familiar and grounding. Walt hums a tune under his breath while sharpening a knife. Sam coughs from inside the tent but manages a weak grin when you glance his way. The rhythm of survival continues. Historians often note that horses were the unsung heroes of frontier life. They weren't just transport. They were warmth, companionship, and protection. Many drovers slept close to their animals during storms, using them as windbreaks. Some claimed they could tell a horse's mood by the tone of its breathing, as though the two shared a single heartbeat. You can believe that. You've seen how your mare senses danger before you do, ears twitching, muscles tightening. You've watched her stand perfectly still when you needed calm and bolt like lightning when speed meant life. The connection feels almost sacred, built from trust rather than ownership. When night falls, you sit near the corral for a while, watching the horses shift in the moonlight. Their silhouettes move slowly against the white ground, tails flicking, heads dipping. The stars above seem endless, stretching across the sky like spilled salt. You find yourself tracing constellations you half remember from childhood, naming them softly to your horse. There's a quiet debate among those who study cowboy life about whether men grew fonder of their horses than of other people. Some think it was loneliness. Others believe it was mutual respect born from necessity. You can't say which is right, but you know that when you look into your mare's eyes, you see understanding there, a kind of wordless loyalty that feels deeper than friendship. The fire pops behind you, and the smell of roasting coffee drifts through the cold air. You stand, stretch, and give your horse one last pat on the neck before heading back toward camp. The snow crunches softly underfoot and your breath fogs in the starlight. When you crawl into your blanket, the horses are still moving gently in the distance, their breathing slow and steady. That sound alone is enough to lull you to sleep. Out here, it's proof that something still lives, still endures, even when the world feels frozen in place. Tomorrow, you'll ride again, check fences, mend gear, repeat the same small rituals of survival. But tonight, you rest easy, knowing that while the cold may be endless, you are not alone. The next evening settles in quiet and deep, the kind of calm that feels almost like a pause in time. The fire glows low, flickering gold against the snow, and for once the wind has stilled. You can hear the faint sound of the herd breathing somewhere beyond the camp, a steady rhythm that mixes with the creak of saddle leather and the soft hiss of coffee boiling. Out here, moments like this are rare, and they're precious. You find yourself exhaling slowly, letting the silence fill you. Then, faintly, from across the fire, comes the sound of music. Sam has his harmonica again, that little silver instrument dulled by cold and use. The first notes drift into the night like smoke, thin and haunting. You feel them more than you hear them. There's something magical about how music sounds in the open air. Old ranch journals often mentioned that even the simplest tune could keep men sane through a long winter. Without towns, without families, songs became anchors. small proof that beauty still existed beyond survival. Some drovers kept harmonicas, others whittled flutes or played fiddles made from scrap wood. The melodies were never perfect, but they were honest. Sam's tune tonight is slow and low, the kind of song that feels half prayer, half lullaby. The sound stretches out over the snow, echoing back faintly from the hills. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling it pulse through you like warmth from the inside. When he stops, the silence that follows feels heavier than before, yet somehow softer too. Then Walt clears his throat and starts talking. He's telling one of his stories again, that familiar, gravel-edged voice carrying just enough humor to keep the cold away. He talks about a time he rode 3 days without food, living off a single can of beans and a handful of coffee grounds. The men laugh quietly, shaking their heads. You've all lived through versions of that story, but it feels good to hear it aloud. There's a comfort in these little gatherings, in the ritual of talking once the day's labor is done. Historians note that cowboy camps often revolved around their evening circles, where men shared tales, sang, or wrote letters by firelight. It wasn't entertainment so much as survival of the spirit. The firelight became their parlor, the open air their living room. Someone passes around a tin of tobacco, and the smell mingles with wood smoke. You take a small pinch, more out of habit than need. The taste is bitter, sharp, familiar. It reminds you of home, though you're not even sure what home means anymore. Maybe it's this: a group of tired men, a fire, a song, and the quiet understanding that no one needs to explain themselves. An odd story surfaces in your memory about a cowboy who claimed his harmonica once saved him from a gunfight. He said he started playing out of nerves, and the other man began singing along instead of shooting. Whether it happened or not, it feels true in a place like this, where the line between danger and kindness is so thin. After the laughter fades, someone digs into a coat pocket and pulls out a folded letter. "From my sister," he says softly. His hands tremble as he opens it. The rest of you look away politely, giving him that small space. Mail is rare out here, and a single sheet of paper can feel like gold. You remember the last letter you received months ago, smudged handwriting, words about harvests and neighbors and how the dog won't stop chasing chickens. You've read it so many times the ink has faded where your thumb rests. No one can truly measure what those letters meant. A few scholars studying ranch life wrote that letters were the last thread tying men to civilization. They carried warmth stronger than any blanket. Some cowhands even slept with them under their coats. You've done that yourself, when nights felt too long and too quiet. Walt asks Sam to play again, something lighter this time. The tune that follows is jaunty, a dance song from somewhere down south. The fire crackles in rhythm, and even the horses seem to shift along with it. The laughter that breaks out feels unguarded, real. It fills the air and rolls away into the open dark, carried by the stillness of snow. When the music fades, you all sit there for a long time, staring into the fire. The flames twist and bend, shadows flickering over tired faces. The air smells of smoke and tin coffee cups, the kind of scent that lingers in your clothes for days. It's oddly comforting. You think about how simple things, music, letters, shared stories can hold a person together. They're small, fragile acts of defiance against a world that doesn't care if you vanish. Maybe that's what survival really means. Refusing to go quiet, even when everything around you demands silence. A log shifts in the fire, sending up a shower of sparks that drift into the night. You follow them with your eyes until they disappear. Then you stand, stretch, and pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders. The stars are bright again, scattered thick across the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, people are sleeping in warm beds, unaware of the music echoing across the frozen plains. You smile faintly at the thought. Out here, under the same sky, you've found a different kind of comfort. It isn't soft or easy, but it's real. The fire burns lower, and one by one the men drift to sleep. You sit a little longer, watching the last embers pulse. In the distance, a coyote calls. and the sound folds into the night like a closing note of Sam's song. You lie down at last, the faint rhythm of harmonica still playing in your mind, a melody that feels like home. The wind shifts again that night, carrying with it a feeling you recognize before you even hear the sound. Trouble is coming. It's not weather this time, but something colder in spirit. You're on watch when the first shot cracks through the air, faint and distant, echoing from somewhere down the ridge. You freeze, hand instinctively dropping to your revolver. The horses jerk their heads up, ears pricked toward the sound. Outlaws, rustlers, the kind of men who wait for deep winter because they know desperation makes ranches weak. It's an old danger, as much a part of the frontier as the storms themselves. Ranch ledgers from that era mention entire herds disappearing in a single night, stolen while cowhands slept or chased by riders cloaked in snow. Some say rustlers were ghosts of the range, appearing out of nowhere and vanishing just as fast. Tonight, the myth feels real. You wake Walt and Sam quietly. No one wastes words. Every sound carries in this kind of stillness. The fire's glow fades as you kick snow over it, darkening the camp. You pull your scarf up over your mouth, your breath quick against the fabric. The moon is bright enough to paint the snow silver, just bright enough to make targets of you all. Walt points toward the north fence line. You can see faint movement there, a cluster of shapes barely visible against the drifts. Your pulse quickens. They move like shadows, careful and deliberate. Whoever they are, they know what they're doing. One detail from a trail diary surfaces in your mind. A ranch hand describing how rustlers used the sound of wind to mask their approach, waiting until the cattle turned restive before striking. The trick was to move slow enough that the herd thought it was just the night breathing. You watch the shapes move in that same rhythm now, so quiet you can barely tell men from snow. Walt gives you a look, the kind that says everything words can't. You nod once. You move wide, circling toward the creek, boots sinking into the powder. The snow squeaks underfoot, each sound painfully loud in your ears. You grip your revolver tight, thumb resting on the hammer. The cold metal bites into your skin. Closer now, you can make out horses. 3 of them, maybe 4. The riders wear dark coats, faces hidden by scarves. They're working quick, cutting the fence and coaxing the nearest cattle through the gap. You feel your heartbeat in your fingertips. There's an old superstition among cowboys that firing first in winter brings bad luck, that the cold remembers violence. You're not sure you believe it, but you hesitate anyway. Then one of the rustlers lifts his head, his eyes catching the moonlight, and you know he's seen you. There's no choice left. You fire once. The crack splits the silence, and the horses rear. Chaos erupts. The rustlers scatter, shouts echoing through the night. Walt fires too, the flash lighting his face for an instant. You see one rider fall, then scramble back up and vanish into the dark. The cattle panic, stamping and bawling, surging toward the fence. You shout and wave your arms, trying to turn them, but the noise drowns everything. The fight lasts only minutes. The sound fades, the movement stops. You stand breathing hard, guns still raised, listening to the echoes die. The herd is still again, the only motion the slow drift of steam from their bodies. Walt walks up beside you, rifle in hand. "You hit anyone?" he asks. You shake your head. "Don't think so." He grunts. "Good. Less paperwork that way." You both laugh quietly, though it's not humor so much as exhaustion. The danger's past for now, but the fence is torn and 2 steers are missing. You'll find them tomorrow if you're lucky. If not, they're gone for good. Researchers who study the frontier's criminal past still argue about what drove rustlers most, greed or survival. Some were desperate ranch hands who lost their own herds to storms. Others were wanderers chasing the illusion of easy money. Out here, the line between outlaw and cowboy was sometimes just one bad winter wide. You kneel to inspect the broken wire, your gloves catching on the sharp edges. The moonlight glints on the metal, each strand a fragile barrier between order and chaos. You tie it back together as best you can. Your fingers numb. Walt stands guard, eyes on the ridge. Neither of you speak. By the time you return to camp, the fire is almost out. Sam's awake, pale and coughing, but alert enough to hold your horse while you dismount. "Was it them?" he asks. You nod. "Rustlers. They're gone now." He spits into the snow. "Always are." You pour coffee into a cup, the steam curling upward in the cold air. The first sip burns your tongue, but you welcome the pain. It feels alive. Around you, the camp settles again, the sounds of fear replaced by the ordinary noises of wind and wood. There's an odd detail you remember from a frontier newspaper clipping. Some ranchers claimed that after a rustling attempt, the cattle would grow more skittish for weeks, as if remembering the danger. Others insisted animals forget faster than men. You glance toward the herd now, their dark shapes calm once more, and wonder which is true. Walt sits beside you, rubbing his hands over the faint flame. "Every winter brings its own devils," he says softly. "Somewhere snow, somewhere skin." You nod, staring into the fire. The embers glow like eyes in the dark, alive and unblinking. You lie down near the warmth, too tired to think, yet unable to let go of the image of those riders fading into the white. In the end, it's not storms or hunger that break a man out here, it's the knowing that danger can come from anywhere, even from the silence. The wind picks up again, gentle this time, brushing snow against your boots. You pull your blanket tight and close your eyes. The fire hums softly beside you, its warmth small but steady. For now, the herd is safe. That is enough. The next morning brings a pale sun that barely touches the land. The snow shines in brittle light, and the quiet feels heavier than usual, as if the world is holding its breath after the night's tension. You sit by the fire, rubbing your hands together, feeling the sting of returning warmth. The coffee in your cup has gone cold, but you sip it anyway, grateful for something familiar. The rustlers have not returned, yet a strange unease lingers. The men work slower, speaking less. The sound of hammering as you repair the fence rings sharp in the still air. Walt mutters about keeping watch tonight, though he does not sound convinced that watchfulness can stop fate. When work is done, you wander a little from camp, following the frozen creek downstream. The surface is smooth and white, but you can hear water moving faintly beneath, whispering through cracks. The sound is strangely human. You stop by a clump of bare cottonwoods and tilt your head back. The branches reach upward like dark ribs against the sky. Out here, you start to notice signs in everything. The way a crow circles before a storm. The way your horse lifts its head moments before the wind shifts. Cowboys of the old frontier often spoke of omens. One trailhand wrote that frost forming on a rope meant bad luck, while frost on a saddle promised safety. Another swore that if the fire smoked toward the north, a storm would come by morning. You find yourself watching such things now, searching for patterns. It is not superstition exactly. It feels like listening to the land's quiet language. Walt once told you that every cowboy believed in something, even if it was only his own luck. He claimed luck was like a trail companion. It walked beside you until the day it didn't. You think of that while staring at the faint clouds gathering far off to the west. In the evenings, the talk sometimes drifts toward faith. Some men speak of church, others of fate, and a few simply keep silent. Religion out here is less about rules and more about rhythm, the rising of the sun, the coming of snow, the return of light after long nights. You don't pray often, but sometimes, when the cold bites too hard, you whisper a word or two into the air. You are not sure who you are talking to, but it helps. A curious story floats among cowhands about a preacher who traveled with a cattle drive one winter, claiming he could calm storms through prayer. The men laughed until a blizzard stopped short of their camp that night. Some said it was coincidence. Others swore the man had power. Whatever the truth, no one joked about prayer again. You crouch by the creek, pick up a small piece of ice, and hold it to the light. Inside the clear surface, A bubble of air shimmers like a tiny trapped star. For some reason, it makes you think of hope, the kind that survives even when there is no reason it should. When you return to camp, the sky has deepened to violet. Sam is sitting by the fire, a scrap of paper in his hands. "Writing again?" you ask. He nods. "To my mother this time. Not sure it'll ever reach her, but it feels right to write it anyway." You sit beside him, the warmth from the fire brushing your face. There's something sacred about these small acts. Historians studying the frontier often note that cowboys carried faith in quiet forms. A letter tucked in a coat, a lucky coin, a cross carved into a saddle horn. Belief took whatever shape a man could carry. You touch the small wooden charm in your pocket, carved years ago by your father. It has no power, yet you keep it close all the same. The fire crackles, and sparks drift upward into the dimming air. Walt tells a story about a time he followed a strange light across the plains, something glowing faintly above the snow. He claims it led him to a lost calf that would have frozen before morning. The others tease him gently, but you can tell by the way he speaks that he truly believes it happened. Maybe it did. Out here, the line between miracle and luck is thin. You stretch your legs toward the fire and let your eyes wander up to the stars. They seem closer tonight, sharp and endless. The same stars watched over every man who rode these plains before you, and they'll outlast you too. The thought isn't sad. It's grounding. You're part of something vast and old, something that doesn't need to explain itself. A few minutes later, the wind picks up again, carrying the faint scent of snow and pine. You tighten your blanket and listen. The horses shuffle, their hooves crunching softly. Somewhere in the dark, a lone coyote calls, its voice long and hollow. It sounds almost like a hymn. You glance at the fire once more. Its glow reflects in the eyes of the men around it, each lost in his own thoughts. Maybe faith, in the end, is not about churches or books. Maybe it's the quiet decision to light a flame even when the wind keeps trying to take it. You whisper to no one in particular. Let it hold through the night. Then you lie back, your head resting on your saddle, and stare up until the stars blur into a soft, silver haze. For the first time in a long while, you sleep without dreams. The snow does not stop for 3 days. It falls in soft, relentless silence, layer upon layer, until the landscape disappears beneath it. The camp shrinks to a small circle of firelight surrounded by white walls. You no longer bother to count the hours. Time dissolves into light and shadow. Every sound, the hiss of the fire, the creak of a saddle, the quiet shifting of the herd feels magnified in the stillness. You wake before dawn, your breath clouding in the dark. The tent walls glitter with frost, tiny crystals sparkling in the faint light. Your blanket is stiff where your breath froze during sleep. You sit up slowly, joints aching, and push open the flap. Outside, the world is motionless. Even the wind seems exhausted. Snowdrifts rise high around the camp, curving like frozen waves. The fence line is gone, buried deep. The cattle huddle close together, their backs crusted with ice. They do not move much anymore. You can hear their low moans drifting through the quiet, heavy and slow, like a kind of mourning. Walt joins you, face half hidden behind his scarf. "We're snowbound," he says simply. You both know what that means. There will be no trips to the trading post, no search for firewood beyond what's already here. Food will have to stretch, and patience will have to stretch further. Old trail journals describe this part of winter as the hardest test. Men went weeks without seeing beyond the edges of camp. They spoke less each day, their world shrinking to the space between fire and snow. Some broke under it, while others grew calm, as if accepting that resistance was useless. You feel that same strange calm settling over you now. The fire crackles weakly. You add more wood, watching the flames lick upward and melt a small circle of warmth into the air. The light glows orange against the snow walls, turning the cold world briefly golden. The scent of smoke mixes with something metallic in the air, a sharpness that makes your throat ache. Inside the tent, Sam is coughing again. His fever rises and falls like the wind. You soak a rag in melted snow, press it against his forehead. He stirs but doesn't wake. Walt stands at the entrance, silent. There is nothing to say. You both know that if the weather doesn't ease soon, Sam might not last the week. There's a memory from an old diary you once read about a cowboy trapped for 20 days by snow in the Rockies. He wrote that the cold made him dream of warmth so vividly he could smell bread baking. When he finally reached town, he said the noise was unbearable. You think of that now, and wonder what silence will do to your own mind if it lasts too long. The days blend. You ration the food carefully. Beans once a day, coffee stretched thin enough to taste like boiled bark. The firewood dwindles faster than you'd hoped. You and Walt start breaking down a broken fence rail for fuel. The sound of the wood splitting echoes sharp and hollow. You try reading aloud from an old newspaper someone left behind. The print is faded. The story's months-old politics. A train wreck. A circus touring back east. It feels like news from another planet. Walt listens quietly, then says, "They got no idea what cold means out there." You laugh once, short and rough. They probably never will. Night falls early. You lie in your blanket, staring at the faint glow of the dying fire through the tent flap. The snow presses close, muting every sound. Your heartbeat feels loud in your ears. There is something oddly intimate about this kind of confinement. It forces you to notice everything. The scrape of cloth, the rhythm of breathing, the faint scent of smoke clinging to your hair. No one really knows how men kept their sanity through these long stretches. Some historians think they invented work to fill the void, sharpening tools, mending saddles that didn't need mending. Others believe they talked to the fire, treating it as a companion. You find yourself doing both. When the loneliness thickens, you whisper a few words into the flames, and the flicker feels like a nod in return. One evening, while stirring the last of the beans, you see something moving outside the camp's edge, a shadow gliding just beyond the light. Your hand freezes on the spoon. For a moment, you think it's a wolf, but then the shape straightens, and you realize it's a man. He steps closer, wrapped in a tattered coat, face hidden by frost and scarf. His horse lags behind, ribs showing through the hide. Walt stands and reaches for his rifle, but the man lifts a shaking hand. "Peace," he says hoarsely. His voice cracks like dry wood. "I just need fire." You guide him closer. The firelight reveals hollow cheeks, cracked lips, and eyes dulled by exhaustion. "He's a trapper," he says. "Been lost for 4 days." You give him coffee and a strip of dried meat. He eats slowly, his hands trembling. The warmth begins to return to his face. When he speaks again, his voice is steadier. He tells stories of frozen rivers and nights spent under trees so heavy with snow that branches broke in the dark. You listen quietly, feeling both pity and recognition. It's strange how quickly a stranger becomes part of your circle when the world shrinks this small. Later, when he's asleep by the fire, Walt mutters, "We're lucky he found us." You nod. Or maybe he's lucky we did. The night deepens, silent except for the crackle of the fire and the slow breathing of men and horses. Outside, the snow continues to fall, gentle but unyielding. The camp glows faintly in the dark, a tiny heartbeat in the endless white. You lie back, eyes open, listening to the quiet weight of winter pressing down on the world. It feels both endless and beautiful, a reminder that survival is not just about strength, but about surrender, about learning to wait, to breathe, and to believe that the thaw will come. For now, that belief is enough to keep the fire burning. The morning after the trapper arrives feels different. The storm has ended, but the quiet it leaves behind feels almost unnatural. The sky is pale and colorless, the horizon blurred where snow meets cloud. You can hear the faint drip of melting ice from the tent's edge, a sound so delicate it feels like music. The worst of the cold has passed, though the world is still frozen solid. You step outside and breathe deeply. The air smells clean, sharp, almost sweet. The snow stretches untouched in every direction, smooth as glass. The herd is still alive, though thinner, their ribs faintly visible beneath the winter coats. You count them slowly, relieved to find the same number as yesterday. Against all odds, they've held on. The trapper stirs by the fire, sitting up with a groan. His name is Eli, though he says little else about himself. He moves stiffly, checking his gear. His coat is torn in several places, his gloves patched with rawhide. You notice small frost scars on his cheeks, pale and uneven. You'll stay a few days, you tell him. Warm up proper. He hesitates, then nods. Long enough to thank you, he replies. He helps with chores that day, feeding the horses and patching the fence. He works quietly, as if talking too much might break his luck. At midday, you see him sitting near the fire, sharing crumbs of biscuit with a small mouse that has ventured out from under the chuck wagon. He laughs softly, a dry, rasping sound. Little fellow's got more sense than most men, he says. You smile. Probably warmer too. Cowhands through history often spoke about the animals that lived near camp during long winters. Mice, stray dogs, coyotes, even magpies became part of the landscape, tolerated rather than chased off. They offered a strange kind of companionship, a reminder that life persisted despite the cold. You remember reading about a ranch cook who fed biscuits to a fox each morning until the spring thaw. He called it his breakfast guest. Later, while gathering wood, you spot two small shapes darting along the creek. Prairie dogs, fur fluffed, moving in quick, nervous bursts. You stop to watch them, amused by their stubborn defiance. Even now, when everything should be asleep beneath the snow, they scurry and dig, making the best of what little warmth the sun offers. You find yourself envying their simple certainty. Eli tells stories that evening, his voice low and even. He talks about trapping along the mountains, about wolves that followed his trail for days, about a bear he once saw digging for roots under a snowdrift. His words fill the air like smoke, slow and curling. Out here, he says, the animals know things we've forgotten. They don't fight the season. They just live through it. You nod, thinking of the herd huddled against the fence, the horses sleeping close together for warmth, the mice hidden beneath the wagon. Survival, you realize, is never elegant. It's quiet, instinctive, and shared. There's a curious note you once read in a frontier journal about how cowboys believed birds carried the promise of spring. A single sparrow seen in midwinter was considered good luck. That night, lying awake, you listen for any trace of birdsong, but there's none. The silence feels deeper because of it. The next day, Eli says he plans to move on. Traps won't check themselves, he jokes weakly as he tightens his saddle. You hand him a small bag of beans and jerky. You'll need it more than we do, you tell him. He looks at you for a long moment, then nods. Maybe I'll bring a pelt or two back your way when the thaw comes. His words hang in the air, half promise, half farewell. As he rides off into the pale morning, his figure growing smaller against the white, you feel a pang of something like loneliness. He wasn't one of your crew, but his presence had warmed the silence, if only for a little while. You stand there watching until he disappears completely, swallowed by distance. The day passes quietly. You and Walt work in rhythm, the unspoken understanding of long partnership guiding every task. When the light fades, you sit near the fire, your coat smelling of smoke and leather. The wind hums softly through the frozen grass, carrying faint scents of pine and ash. No one can fully explain why companionship with animals or strangers meant so much to men on the frontier, but historians often say it came down to reflection. Out here, where the land is endless and the days bleed together, every living thing feels like a mirror. You look at the horses standing near the firelight, their bodies steaming faintly, and you see a reflection of your own endurance staring back. You feed them each a handful of hay, running your hands over their necks. Their muscles twitch, their eyes half close in contentment. The herd settles soon after, a low chorus of breathing rising into the night. You sit beside the dying fire, the mouse from earlier darting near your boot to steal a crumb. You leave it there on purpose. When you finally lie down, the stars shine brighter than they have in weeks, cold and perfect. Somewhere out there, Eli is riding under the same sky. The thought comforts you. The world is vast, yet every spark of life, man, beast, or bird, feels somehow connected by that same thin thread of survival. You close your eyes and listen to the horses shifting in the dark, the small rustle of creatures in the snow. For once, the sounds of the night are not lonely. They are alive. By the time the sun rises again, the air has shifted. The sharp edge of winter still bites, but there is a faint softness to the light now, a subtle promise that the season is beginning to turn. You can feel it in your bones as you saddle your horse. The worst has passed, though the struggle is far from over. Today, you ride toward the trading post. The supplies are running low, and even the hardiest men need coffee, salt, and news to keep their spirits from cracking. The trail is little more than a faint depression in the snow, marked by broken branches and half-buried rocks. It stretches ahead like a pale ribbon through the emptiness. The trip to the post is dangerous in winter, but every ranch has to make it. Records from that era tell of riders who vanished on those journeys, lost to blizzards or thin ice. Others made it back with stories of frozen rivers crossed by moonlight or wolves pacing them for miles. You tighten your scarf and hope you'll have a story that ends with coming home. The land feels almost asleep. The trees bow under the weight of ice, their branches glistening like glass. A few birds flutter from one frozen bush to another, their wings flashing white in the pale sun. You keep your eyes on the horizon, where a faint plume of smoke suggests another camp, or maybe just the mirage of hope that distance creates. A curious old trick you remember from a weathered trail guide says that you can tell how far a post is by the number of ravens in the sky. Supposedly, 1 means you're halfway there, and 2 means you're close. You smile when you see a pair circling ahead, black shapes moving lazily against the silver clouds. You don't believe in signs anymore, but it feels good to pretend. Hours pass in silence. Your horse's hooves sink deep into the snow, each step an effort. The world narrows to the steady rhythm of breathing, the creak of leather, the distant whisper of wind. You think about the men who carved these trails long before you, how many must have fallen here, buried under the same white calm. Their names are gone, but their paths remain. By midday, you reach the frozen creek that marks the halfway point. You dismount, leading your horse carefully across the ice. It groans under the weight, deep and low, a sound that makes your heart jump. You move slow, testing each step. The water below flashes dark and cold through thin cracks. When you reach the far bank, you let out a breath you hadn't realized you were holding. No one agrees how trading posts managed to survive in such isolation. Some were family-run, others operated by companies far back east. But every cowboy who rode the frontier knew the feeling of seeing one rise from the snow like salvation. You catch sight of the building just before sunset, a squat shape huddled against the white. Smoke curls from its chimney, faint but real. The door creaks open as you approach. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of kerosene, leather, and tobacco. Shelves line the walls, beans, salt, canned peaches, flour, coffee. The trader, a broad man with a beard frosted white, greets you with a nod. "Didn't think anyone make it this week," he says. You grin. "Had to. We were starting to drink boiled snow for breakfast." He laughs, then sets about filling your order. You trade what you can: pelts, a few spare tools, and the last of Eli's traps that he left behind. In return, you get sugar, tobacco, and 1 tin of peaches, a luxury worth more than gold right now. As he works, the trader shares bits of news. A train derailed 2 towns east, a new telegraph line being built, talk of spring cattle drives starting early this year. The sound of his voice feels strange after so many days of silence. You could listen for hours. He offers you a place to sleep, but you shake your head. "The herd won't wait," you tell him. He understands. Every man out here does. You take one last look around the small store, soaking in the light, the warmth, the faint murmur of a clock ticking on the wall. It feels like civilization, fragile and far away. When you ride back out into the cold, the sun has already dipped below the ridge. The sky glows faintly pink, and the snow sparkles like crushed glass. The supplies clink softly in your saddlebags. You take one of the tins of coffee and tuck it close to your chest for warmth. It feels almost alive against you. There's something humbling about returning along the same trail. It looks different now, though nothing has changed. Maybe it's you who's changed. Your eyes clearer after the brief taste of comfort. You feel both smaller and stronger at once. Halfway back, you stop to rest your horse near the creek. The water murmurs faintly beneath the ice. You pour a little from your flask, take a sip, and whisper to the night, almost there. The wind carries your words away, but you imagine they find their way to camp. Historians sometimes write that trading trips were lifelines not just for supplies, but for hope. The ride reminded men that the world extended beyond the snow, that there were still other voices, other fires burning somewhere out there. You feel that now the faint but real pulse of life threading through the frozen silence. By the time you see the first flicker of your campfire in the distance, exhaustion has settled deep into your limbs. Walt's figure moves near the light, small but unmistakable. You raise your hand in greeting, too tired to call out. He waves back, grinning, and the sight fills you with warmth that coffee alone could never match. When you finally sit by the fire, the men gather close to see what you've brought. You pass around the tin of peaches like it's treasure. Sam's eyes brighten for the first time in weeks. You all eat together, sharing laughter that feels almost new again. The taste is sweet, sharp and fleeting, but for a few moments, it feels like spring has already begun. The morning after the trading trip feels easier. The cold still bites, but it has softened just enough to let sound travel farther. You can hear the herd shifting across the valley, their calls carrying clear through the thin air. The fire smokes lazily, and the smell of new coffee fills the camp. For the first time in weeks, there's a flicker of normal rhythm again. You sit by the fire with Walt and Sam, each man holding a tin cup close to the heat. The tin of peaches is long gone, but the memory of its sweetness lingers like a shared secret. The mood is lighter now, the kind that makes conversation drift towards stories rather than survival. Walt stirs his coffee with a stick. "Remember old Crowley?" he asks suddenly. Sam chuckles, his voice rough. "The one who used to wear 2 coats in summer?" Walt nods. "That's the one. He said a man should never winter alone unless he was ready to start talking to ghosts." You smile at that, because you know what he means. After months of fighting storms and silence, companionship feels sacred. Historians who wrote about ranch life often mentioned how tightly crews bonded through winters. Out here, friendships weren't born of shared hobbies or opinions. They came from shared endurance. You trusted the man beside you not because you liked him, but because you needed him. It's an odd kind of brotherhood. There are arguments, sometimes fierce ones, over rations or horses or who gets the first watch, but they never last long. The land doesn't leave room for grudges. The cold teaches forgiveness faster than any sermon. Sam laughs quietly. "Guess that's why we don't kill each other." Walt smirks. "Speak for yourself." The fire crackles, sending sparks up into the pale light. The teasing feels good. It makes the camp sound alive again. You think about how these bonds form without anyone meaning them to. Letters from drovers often describe their partners in simple words: good hand, steady, won't quit in a storm. Praise was rare, but when it came, it meant more than anything else. You glance around the camp and realize that even with the cold, the hunger, and the loneliness, there's comfort in this small circle of men. A curious note from an old diary comes to mind. One cowboy wrote that he could tell when a man would survive winter by the way he shared his coffee. Generous men lived longer, he claimed, because generosity built warmth the fire couldn't. You remember that as you hand Sam the last of the pot without being asked. He nods once, and no words are needed. Later, while checking the herd, you and Walt ride side by side, the snow crunching beneath the horses. The sun is weak but steady, painting the drifts in silver light. The herd moves slower now, conserving energy, their hides thick with frost. You work in silence for a long while, each understanding the other's pace without speaking. Out here, communication isn't talk, it's small gestures, a raised hand, a tilt of the head, a soft whistle to move the cattle. You and Walt move together like parts of one machine. It's not friendship in the usual sense, it's deeper, quieter. Researchers studying frontier crews often describe this as a functional intimacy. Men who rarely spoke learned each other's thoughts through motion and habit. You think that's true. When Walt rides ahead now, you know without asking that he's checking the ridge for strays. When he glances back once, you know that everything's fine. The day ends calmly. You return to camp and share a supper of beans, bacon grease, and laughter. Sam tells a story about a ranch hand who swore he saw a ghost steer one night, glowing white in the snow. Said it was the spirit of a lost herd, Sam says with a grin. Walt chuckles. Probably just moonlight on a fence post. You laugh with them, but secretly, you hope such a thing exists. The world feels kinder with mysteries in it. As night deepens, you sit a little apart, watching the fire die down. The others have drifted to sleep, their breathing slow and steady beneath their blankets. The quiet between you is not loneliness now, it's trust, the kind built from long hours and shared hardship. There's a quote from an old ranch record that comes to mind. You can always tell the measure of a man by who he rides winter with. You look around at your companions and realize you've been measuring yourself too. The winter has taken much, but it's also revealed something you hadn't noticed before. A calm strength, a patience you never had when life was easier. You stand and walk to the edge of the camp. The moon hangs low, pale and wide, bathing everything in soft light. The snow sparkles like tiny mirrors, and your shadow stretches long across it. Behind you, the fire flickers faintly, marking the center of a world that now feels small but complete. For a moment, you think of spring, of the sound of rivers running free again, of green grass and open trails. But then you stop. This silence, this company, even the endless white, it has its own kind of beauty. You understand now why some men never returned east. The land might be harsh, but it's honest, and the people who survive it are bound by that honesty forever. You turn back toward the fire, settling down beside your sleeping crew. The stars are bright above, the air still, and for once you don't feel like the cold is your enemy. It feels like part of you, a companion that shaped the bond between every living thing in this frozen world. You close your eyes, the warmth of the fire brushing your face, and think quietly, we've made it this far together. The thought lingers like a lullaby. Then sleep takes you, soft and dreamless. The next morning dawns in faint gold. The sun rises low and hazy over the white horizon, painting everything with the color of old brass. The snow has stopped falling entirely now, and the air carries a new kind of sound, the faint drip of melting ice. You lift your head and listen. That simple rhythm feels like a heartbeat returning to the land. You walk beyond the edge of camp and see patches of ground appearing where the snow has thinned. The sight of brown earth after so many weeks of white feels almost miraculous. You crouch and run a gloved hand over the frozen soil. It's still hard as stone, but you can sense the life waiting underneath, asleep and patient. Walt joins you, hands in his coat pockets. Hear that? He asks quietly. You nod. The thaw's coming. He smiles without showing his teeth. About time. Thought winter might have forgot us. The idea makes you laugh, but a part of you wonders if winter ever really leaves. In letters from old trail riders, the first thaw was often described with reverence. Men wrote about the smell of wet earth, about the sound of snow sliding off roofs, about how the horses seemed to breathe easier. It wasn't just weather changing, it was spirit returning. You feel that same energy now, faint but undeniable. Sam steps out of the tent, coughing lightly but standing on his own. His color is better, and his eyes look brighter. "Smells like mud," he says, grinning. You grin back. "Best smell in the world right now." The cattle are moving more freely, shaking ice from their coats. A few begin to graze where grass peeks through. You feel a swell of quiet pride seeing them alive after so many storms. You think of every frozen morning, every desperate night by the fire, and realize how much of survival is built on small, stubborn choices. There's a curious phrase you once read in a rancher's journal. "The earth forgives itself each spring." You repeat it in your head as you watch the thaw spread across the plains. It feels true. The same land that froze your fingers and nearly broke your spirit now softens again, almost apologetic. By afternoon, the sound of dripping becomes a steady chorus. Water runs down from the ridge, forming rivulets that snake through the snow. You take your horse and ride slowly along the creek bed, careful not to sink into the melting drifts. The air is wet, heavy with the scent of pine and damp soil. You can hear the faint gurgle of the creek breaking free beneath the ice. As you ride, memories of the long winter drift through your mind, the night the wolves came, the storm that blinded you, the taste of burned coffee shared between friends. It feels distant now, almost dreamlike. The pain, the cold, the fear all softened by the knowledge that you endured. Historians sometimes write that the first thaw of the season marked more than a change in weather. It marked a return of sound and color. After months of silence, the world began speaking again. You can hear it now, the caw of a distant raven, the soft splash of melting snow dropping into puddles, the creak of branches as the ice slides off. The land is waking, and it feels like it's taking you with it. You stop by a small rise where the snow has melted enough to reveal tufts of dead grass. Dismounting, you crouch and pull a handful from the ground. It smells like dust and memory. You let it fall between your fingers, the wind catching it and carrying it away. An old superstition said that burning the first dry grass of spring brought luck for the next season. You strike a match and touch it to the tuft. The flame flares bright and brief, then vanishes. The scent of smoke lingers in the damp air, sweet and fleeting. You smile at the sight, not for the luck but for the symbolism of it, the small, golden fire against the fading white. By evening, the sky blushes with soft color, pink fading to blue. The air has changed texture. It's heavier, almost humid. Meltwater trickles beneath your boots as you walk back to camp. Walt is mending a strap, and Sam is stirring beans in the pot. Both look up when you arrive. "Feels different, doesn't it?" Sam says. You nod. "Like the world's remembering itself." Walt chuckles low. "Let's hope she remembers the grass too. Cattle can't live on mud." You sit near the fire, feeling the heat without shivering for the first time in months. The smell of beans and smoke fills the air, and the faint laughter of your crew mingles with the sound of melting snow. It's a quiet kind of joy, the kind that doesn't shout but settles deep. You remember reading somewhere that cowboys never truly trusted spring. They'd smile at the warmth but keep their coats close, waiting for the next cold wind. You understand that now. The thaw feels fragile, temporary, as if one breath from the north could erase it. But for tonight, you allow yourself to believe in it. The stars appear early, softer behind thin clouds. You lean back on your saddle, watching them glimmer through the mist. Each one looks closer now, as if the thaw has lifted some invisible wall between earth and sky. You close your eyes and listen to the slow dripping of snow melting from the trees. It's not silence anymore, it's rhythm, steady and alive. You whisper to yourself, "We made it." The words feel solid, like something earned. Somewhere out there, the land exhales too, and for the first time in months, the sound carries warmth. The thaw gives you a false sense of peace before the final test arrives. The day begins calm and mild, the sun rising like a pale coin over the horizon. You take it as a good sign, maybe too eagerly. The air smells wet and new, and for a few precious hours, everyone in camp dares to believe the worst is over. But by afternoon the light shifts, the wind sharpens, and you feel it, the storm returning for one last stand. You sense it first in the horses. They grow restless, tails flicking, nostrils flaring. The sky darkens, grey deepening to a heavy slate. You glance at Walt, and he's already watching the horizon. "It's not done with us yet," he says quietly. You don't answer. There's nothing to say. The world has gone still in that eerie way it always does before the cold breaks loose again. Historians often note that late winter storms were the most dangerous. They came when men were tired, animals were weak, and supplies were nearly gone. You've read accounts of ranches lost just weeks before spring, the cold striking back like a last cruel joke. You think about that as you tighten the ropes on the tents, your fingers trembling not from fear but from fatigue. The first gust hits like a shove. It carries snow and ice so fine it feels like smoke, stinging your face. Within minutes, the camp is a blur of motion, men shouting, horses pulling at their ties, canvas snapping in the wind. The storm arrives not as a visitor but as a siege. You move fast, driving stakes deeper, shielding the fire, shouting orders through the roar. The cattle cry out, their voices lost in the wind. You can barely see them, just the vague, shifting mass beyond the fence. Walt grabs your arm. "We've got to hold them together," he yells. You nod and pull your scarf up over your mouth, the fabric freezing instantly against your skin. You ride into the storm. The snow blinds you, filling your eyes and mouth, numbing your face. Your horse moves hesitantly, pushing against gusts strong enough to unseat you. The herd is a chaos of motion, bodies pressing, horns clashing, hooves churning up the softening ground. You shout, wave your hat, whistle, anything to keep them from scattering. The sound is torn apart before it travels 10 feet. One detail from a ranch account flashes in your mind. A drover describing how, in storms like this, the cattle would sometimes panic and stampede into the wind, unable to see where they were going. He wrote that the only way to stop them was to ride ahead, to turn them with your own body in their path. You grit your teeth, spurring your horse forward into the swirling white. You can hear Walt beside you, his voice faint but steady, calling commands you can't fully catch. You both move instinctively now, circling the herd, pushing them toward the trees where the land dips low. The snow stings your eyes, but you press on. Every decision feels immediate, primal. The cold becomes something alive, wrapping around you, clawing into every seam. Your hands lose feeling, your legs are soaked. You stop thinking in words. There's only movement, breath, and the will to keep the animals together. For hours, or maybe minutes, it's impossible to tell. You and Walt fight the wind, turning, shouting, driving the herd step by step toward shelter. Then, as if satisfied, the storm begins to ease. The wind falters, the snow thickens and falls heavy but slower now, like ash from a dying fire. You slump in the saddle, exhausted. Your horse's flanks are crusted with ice, its sides heaving. You reach down and pat its neck, the motion slow, your gloves stiff. The herd is safe in the hollow now, packed tightly, their dark shapes steaming against the white. You can hear their breathing, steady and alive. It's the best sound you've ever heard. When you return to camp, Walt is already there, his face ghostly with frost, his beard rimed with white. He looks up and grins, teeth flashing. "Told you it had one more in it." You laugh, weak but genuine. "Next time, let's hope it quits while it's ahead." You rebuild the fire with shaking hands. The wood hisses, the flames catching slow and reluctant. The heat crawls back into your bones in painful waves. Sam hands you a cup of coffee that tastes more like smoke than water, but it's heaven. There's a curious bit of lore that surfaces in your mind. Some cowboys believed the last storm of winter was a test sent by the land itself, meant to measure the worth of those who dared to live on it. If they endured, they earned spring. If not, the earth reclaimed them quietly. You look at the flicker of flame, the herd breathing steady beyond the camp, and decide you've passed whatever test this was. Outside the circle of light, The snow keeps falling, soft and even now. The wind sighs low through the trees, no longer angry but tired. You can feel the season shifting in that sigh, like the closing of a door. Walt leans back against his saddle, eyes half closed. "You think it's done?" he asks. You stare into the fire, watching the sparks drift upward and vanish into the dark. "Yeah," you say softly. "I think it's done." The storm fades into memory as quickly as it came. The silence that follows is deep, but not empty. It's full of everything that survived. You look toward the horizon where the clouds begin to break, revealing a thin band of pale blue. The sight fills you with a calm that words cannot touch. The land lies quiet, battered but unbroken. So are you. For the first time all winter, you believe in spring. The morning after the last storm is quiet in a way you've never known before. The snow lies smooth and untouched, glittering faintly in the new sunlight. The air is cold, but it carries a different kind of stillness, something lighter, like the land itself is resting after the struggle. You step outside the tent and breathe deeply. The world smells clean again. The fire has burned low during the night, so you stir the ashes and coax the embers back to life. A thin ribbon of smoke rises, curling into the clear sky. The sound of it crackling is soft, comforting. Behind you, Sam is still asleep, his breathing steady. Walt emerges from his blanket, blinking against the bright light. "It's over," he says simply. You nod. No need for more words. The cattle stand in small clusters, steam rising from their hides. They look stronger now, as if the storm itself toughened them. You walk among them, running a hand over a flank here, a muzzle there. The warmth under your glove feels like a heartbeat returning to the land. Letters from ranchers who survived the harsh winters of the 1800s often mention the first clear morning after the final storm. Some wrote that the silence was so deep it frightened them, as if nature had paused to take count of who was left. Others said it felt holy, like standing in a church made of air and light. You understand both feelings as you walk through the crisp morning haze. You find one of the old fence posts poking through the snow, the wire still holding. A small victory, but a real one. You think of every fence lost in blizzards, every tool buried and found again in spring, and you realize how much of cowboy life is just rebuilding what the winter tried to erase. By midday, the sun softens the top layer of snow, turning it to a thin sheen of water that reflects the sky. The horses stomp and snort, eager to move. You saddle up and ride along the ridge with Walt, scanning the horizon for movement. The air feels different against your face, no longer slicing, just cool and alive. Halfway along the trail, you find a patch of open ground where the wind has swept the snow away entirely. Tiny green shoots poke through the frozen dirt. You dismount and kneel, brushing them gently with your gloved fingers. They bend but do not break. "Look at that," Walt says behind you, voice soft with awe. "First grass." You smile. A deep, quiet smile that starts somewhere in your chest and spreads outward. "They're tougher than they look," you reply. He grins. "So are we." Later that day, you build a new fire and cook beans that actually taste good, the smoke carrying the scent of wood and grease into the cold air. Sam hums while stirring the pot, and Walt taps his boot in rhythm. For the first time in months, there's laughter without tension. It rolls easily through the camp, blending with the sound of melting snow dripping from the wagon roof. You remember a line from an old journal kept by a trail boss who survived the winter of 1886. When the sun finally came back, the world seemed too bright for my eyes. You squint into the light now, understanding exactly what he meant. After months of white and grey, color feels almost overwhelming. As evening approaches, you walk down to the creek. The ice is breaking apart, chunks drifting slowly downstream. You can hear the water running clear beneath them, gurgling and alive. You crouch, scoop a handful and drink. The shock of cold rushes through you, sharp and invigorating. It tastes like something pure, something earned. There's a tradition you once heard about. Cowboys dipping their hands into the first thawed water of spring as a way to wash away the winter. You do it now, letting the icy current sting your palms. It feels like renewal, like a baptism of grit and gratitude. When you return to camp, the light has turned golden. The snow glows pink along the edges of the horizon. The horses are restless, pawing at the earth, eager for movement. You can almost feel the season changing in their bodies. The cold no longer rules everything. Life is beginning to push back. Researchers who study frontier life often say that recovery after a brutal winter wasn't about celebration but quiet reflection. Men didn't shout their joy. They sat in silence and let the warmth settle in their bones. You see that now as the three of you sit by the fire, watching the sun sink behind the hills. No one talks much. There's no need. The world has endured, and so have you. That's enough. When darkness falls, you lie back on your bedroll and look at the stars. They shine brighter than ever, each one sharp and steady against the black. You listen to the faint sounds of the herd, the crackle of the fire, and the sigh of wind in the trees. All the noise of survival has quieted into something gentler. You think about how every hardship leaves a mark, but also how every mark tells a story. The scars on your hands, the wear on your coat, the memories of storms and hunger, they are all proof that you lived through something immense. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The air smells of pine, smoke, and something faintly sweet, the promise of spring. For the first time in what feels like forever, you let yourself imagine warmth that lasts. The earth has remembered itself again, and so have you. By the time the next week passes, the snow has retreated to the hollows, and the air carries the smell of damp soil. The plains are still quiet, but not the kind of quiet that means danger. It's the hush before life begins again. The cattle graze further each day, their bellies no longer hollow. The horses nicker softly at sunrise, shaking their manes free of frost. Even the wind sounds warmer now. You spend the morning mending what winter broke. The fence wires sag. The posts lean like old men. You hammer and twist, your gloves black with mud and rust. The rhythm of work feels good, almost peaceful. Walt hums as he helps, his voice carrying across the field in low tones. Sam rides along the creek, checking for strays. The ordinary tasks feel new again, like rituals performed for the first time. Later, when you sit to rest, you pull from your coat pocket the small notebook you've been writing in all winter. The pages are wrinkled and stained from coffee and smoke, but the words inside still hold. You read the early entries, rough sketches of cold nights, fears, and quiet hopes. The handwriting wobbles where your hands once trembled. You smile, half in disbelief. You made it through all that. Historians often mention how cowboys carried their winters with them long after the thaw. The stories they told became half truth, half legend, shaped by memory and longing. The winters grew colder in retelling, the dangers larger, the fires warmer. Maybe that's how men make peace with suffering. They turn it into something worth repeating. You think of how many fires like yours once burned across these plains, each circle of light holding men against the dark. Some stories survived in songs, others in silence. But all of them, in their own way, became part of the mythology that still clings to this land. A quirky tale you once heard returns to you now. A cowboy who swore he saw ghost riders drifting through the snow one spring night. He claimed they were the souls of men who never made it out of winter, still searching for their herds under the moon. You used to laugh at stories like that. Now, you're not so sure. There were nights this season when the air itself felt haunted by those who had come before. Walt sits beside you and tosses a stick into the fire. You ever think about how they'll talk about us? He asks. You look up from your notebook. What do you mean? He grins. The next bunch of drovers, years from now. They'll say we wrestled storms and tamed blizzards with our bare hands. You laugh. They'll forget the part about frozen boots and burnt beans. Walt chuckles, shaking his head. That's the trick of legend. It keeps the glory, loses the misery. You stare at the flames for a while, thinking of all the unnamed hands that built this way of life, the trail cooks, the herders, the nameless riders buried without markers. Their stories linger not in books but in gestures passed along, the way a rope is coiled, the song hummed on the trail, the patience to wait for morning light. Researchers say that folklore kept the cowboy spirit alive long after the open range was fenced. Every story told around a fire became both history and inheritance. You feel that inheritance now, quiet but steady, flowing from one generation to the next like the thawing creek behind camp. Sam rides back in as the sun dips low. He waves a small bundle of early flowers he found near the riverbank. They're fragile and pale yellow, their petals trembling in the wind. "First bloom," he says proudly. You take one and tuck it behind your ear, grinning. Walt laughs loud enough to startle the horses. "You planning to be a preacher or a poet?" he teases. You shrug. "Maybe both." The laughter settles into easy silence. The sun sets slow, painting the sky in rose and amber. The snow glows faintly pink before fading to grey. You stare at it, feeling that old ache of wonder. The world keeps moving no matter how many winters it endures. When darkness comes, you and the others sit close to the fire. Sam begins to hum a tune you recognize from months ago, softer now, more hopeful. You join in without thinking. The harmonies blend with the crackle of the flames, the sound weaving through the cool night like a gentle thread. There's a line from a newspaper you once read that comes to mind. Cowboys were not born for comfort, but for endurance. You think it fits. The kind of endurance that survives not just storms but silence, not just hunger but memory. The stars rise again, clear and steady. You tilt your head back, tracing their patterns as you used to when the nights were endless. They look different now, softer somehow. Maybe it's the air, or maybe it's you. You realize that the cold you've carried in your bones all season isn't just from weather, it's from the weight of time itself, from holding still in a world that never truly stops moving. You reach for your notebook and write one last line before closing it. We lived through the frozen days, and they lived through us. Walt glances over your shoulder and nods approvingly. "That's a good one," he says. You smile. "Might make a story someday." He pokes at the fire with a stick, sparks jumping into the night. "Then tell it right," he replies. "Make sure they remember the quiet parts." The final weeks of cold slip away like a long exhale. The snow shrinks into the shadows. The air warms with the scent of thawed soil, and the world begins to move again. You wake one morning to birdsong, faint but unmistakable. It catches you off guard. For months, the only music was the wind and the fire, and now this small, living sound feels like a miracle. You sit up slowly, smiling before you even realize you're doing it. The camp looks different under this new light. The drifts have melted into muddy patches, and grass shows through in soft streaks of green. The cattle wander further from the corral, no longer huddled together for warmth. The horses graze quietly, tails flicking lazily. Even the fire burns easier, its smoke rising straight into the blue sky instead of bending sideways in the wind. You stretch your arms and breathe deep. The air tastes cleaner, full of promise. For the first time since autumn, you can feel the sun's warmth on your face. You stand still, letting it soak into you until your skin tingles. Walt is already up, tightening the straps on the supply wagon. "We'll move soon," he says, his voice light. "Cattle can't stay penned forever." You nod, watching him work. There's rhythm in his motions, something calm and familiar. The crew feels different now, quieter but stronger, as if the winter hammered something solid into each of you. Historians write that spring on the frontier wasn't just a season but a rebirth. Men who'd been half ghosts all winter came alive again. Some shaved their beards for the first time in months. Others wrote letters home with hands that finally stopped shaking. You can imagine that scene repeating across the plains, 1,000 small resurrections happening at once. Sam pours coffee into tin cups, humming softly. His cough is gone, replaced by a rough laugh when the pot almost tips. "Never thought I'd be grateful for mud," he says. scraping his boots clean with a stick. You grin. Mud means life. The herd moves easily now, their hooves sinking into the soft earth. You and Walt ride along the edges, guiding them toward open range. The air hums with insects, faint but rising. You can almost taste spring, sharp and sweet like wet grass. An old frontier song you once heard drifts through your mind. When the snow gives way, the heart forgives. You hum the tune under your breath, feeling the truth in it. Winter was hard, but it carved something lasting in you. The cold stripped away everything unnecessary until only the essentials remained: fire, food, breath, and the bond between living things. You pause on a ridge overlooking the plains. The view stretches for miles, puddles glinting like mirrors, patches of green breaking through, clouds moving slow and white across the open sky. Below, the herd grazes in lazy lines. The world looks new again, though it's the same land that nearly broke you. That's the strange magic of survival. It makes the familiar feel sacred. Walt rides up beside you. You know, he says, squinting into the sunlight, one day folks will forget how cold it got. They'll tell stories, but they won't feel it like we did. You nod. Maybe that's the point. You live it once, so others don't have to. He smiles. Maybe so. Still, I hope they remember the fire. As the day fades, the camp settles near a stream that runs clear for the first time in months. The sound of it flowing fills the air with peace. You sit by the water, washing your hands, watching the current carry tiny bits of ice away. Each piece drifts for a while before melting completely, disappearing without a trace. It feels like the perfect image of the season ending. You pull out your notebook again and add a final entry. The pencil moves slow, steady. Winter took everything it could, but it gave something back too. It taught patience. It taught stillness. It taught that warmth matters most when you've had to earn it. You close the notebook and set it aside, staring at the reflection of the sky in the water. It wavers gently, clouds moving across it like slow ghosts. That night, the three of you sit close to the fire one last time. Sam plays his harmonica, the same tune he played back in the hardest weeks. But it sounds different now, lighter, warmer, more like a farewell than a plea. Walt pours the last of the coffee, lifting his cup toward the flames. To the living, he says. You raise yours in reply. And to the winter that made us. The fire crackles, sending sparks up into the dark. Around you, the world is alive again. The wind smells of pine and damp earth. The stars glow steady and calm. You lie back, feeling the warmth fade gently from your face. Spring has come at last. You know it not just by sight or sound, but by the weight that has lifted from your chest. The cold may return someday, but you'll remember this: the laughter, the thaw, the small triumphs that stitched one long, hard season into something worth keeping. The fire hums quietly beside you. Your heartbeat slows. The night softens. You close your eyes, smiling. The world is warm again. The story fades now, as softly as a trail dissolving into morning light. The fire has burned to ash, and the sky above it stretches wide and silver. You lie still, wrapped in the quiet that follows endurance. The cold has gone, but its memory lingers in the gentlest way, reminding you of everything that was overcome. The plains breathe slowly. You can hear the faint rustle of grass, the distant murmur of water returning to life. The stars overhead seem closer, softer, their light no longer sharp but tender. The land feels calm, at peace, as if it too has earned its rest. You imagine your horse standing nearby, its head low, its eyes half closed. You imagine Walt and Sam asleep beside the embers, their faces eased of the tension that once drew hard lines around their mouths. You can almost hear Sam's harmonica, fading to a single long note that drifts into silence. The wind that moves through the camp is warm now. It touches your cheek like a farewell. You breathe in slowly, feeling the rhythm of the plains settle into your heartbeat. There's nothing left to fight, nothing left to fear, only the deep, quiet satisfaction of having endured. Let the world around you dim. Let the sounds grow smaller, the breaths slower. You are part of this land now, a thread woven into its long, calm story. The fire hums its final tune, low and kind. The stars blink once more, then fade behind your closing eyes. Sleep comes easy here, carried on the softest wind. Sweet dreams, cowboy.